maybe I'll just go through the file while everybody's waiting. By the way, hi, I'm Ernie Laws. I'm the current EO president. I tell most everybody in this room, few people, but we get a little bit of information and background about Klyn here. Born with cystic fibrosis, motivational sales and keynote speaker, Klyn was told that she would live past age 14 and spent much of her life growing up inside hospitals battling disease. Now in her 30s, she's endured 67 hospitalizations and built a sales consultancy, teaching sales managers and their teams how to become champions in their industry. She's a two-time best-selling author, sales strategist, and motivational speaker whose expertise has appeared in publications, including primetime debut on NBC 19 with Lester Holt. Her business, MK Foundation, works directly with mid-sized companies to create sales operational processes that address recruiting, custom creation of sales playbook, and management accountability.
It's a lot of words. Thank you, Ernie. Okay. Sure, we're going to get into sales. You're going to have about 2.5, maybe 3 hours, depending on time, to talk about sales. First of all, is this going well for everybody at home? Okay. Hi, everyone at home. But to start off, I don't think it does any justice unless I elaborate a little bit about how this blonde millennial knows anything about sales for all of you in EO. I still remember that feeling as if I was looking down on my body. I was alone in the ER. The sterilized tray was to my left, and the nasal cannula was pumping oxygen into my lungs. I had a pen in my hand, and on the sterilized tray was a stack of papers that my social worker had just dropped off on the day she encouraged me to file for Social Security disability. And I remembered thinking, if I sign this sheet of paper, I lose everything. I bought my first house when I was 22 years old. For those of you trying to do the math, I will be 34 this year. You see, I was born with a genetic condition known as cystic fibrosis. Pull of hands, anybody familiar with what that is? Okay, a couple of you. For those of you in the room and at home, hey, who are not familiar, allow me to elaborate. So cystic fibrosis is a #1 genetic killer. And what it simply does is it fills my lungs with a thick and sticky mucus that I cannot cough out. Okay. That I cannot cough out. It has destroyed my pancreas. Every morning before I start my breakfast, I take on average of 7 pills, 1-hour nebulization treatments. And then every evening I do the same nebulization treatments. Throughout the day, I average 48 pills, one of which is a genetic modulator that completely rewrites my genetic code. If that isn't enough, in 2001, I slipped into ketoacidosis, which is code for diabetic coma, as my blood sugars reached 1,286, and I was spent a month on life support. I am now completely antibiotic resistant to 4 out of the 5 IV drips that are allowed to treat me. And after roughly 68 hospitalizations, my veins no longer support the PICC line, so I had to get a portacath installed into my chest for immediate vein access. What happens in a matter of a couple of days is I can be just as fine hiking in Yosemite, going on tours in Costa Rica. As many of you know from following my Instagram, I travel a ton. And then the very next day, something will happen. Someone will breathe on me, sans COVID. A lot of the bacteria can come from plants. And in a matter of a couple of days, I'm fine, just like you see now. And I go down and I lose all ability to breathe. The infection rears up in my lungs, and I literally need medical help to walk to my car to get to the ER. Each hospitalization ranges in length from 2 nights, but the average being 14 days. The longest one has been 6 months. And it is estimated that I have spent well over 12 years of my life inside of hospital walls. So I open with that because in those hospital walls is where I learned everything to do about sales, systems, and processes. I don't have the traditional corporate upbringing. I don't have the background per se that many of you have, but I've got a perspective on sales and systems and processes that's unique enough that has kept me alive to this day. In order to paint the picture for you of what it's truly been like, I'm going to take you back to the fall of 2013. This is the third time in 20 minutes my IV pole beeps, alerting me that there is air in the lines of the cath connected to my port. And the thing is I know I could page the nurse. Except the thing is when she comes in, we'd spend 20 minutes talking about everything that's happened in the 2 months since I've seen her last. So I reach over to my pole, I silence the mind-numbing alarm, and I gently start to flick the air out of the lines of the tubes. And as it flicks up, dangle it a little bit, I start thinking about everything in this room. You see on the shelf are 24 roses of the love of my life dropped off. And we do this every single hospitalization because regardless if it's been 2 nights or 21 days, the only goal I ever have is to just focus on trying to outlive the roses that will die in the corner. I have a stack of my books off to the side, which the doctors asked me to autograph. I have my blanket from home, my lucky teddy bear to keep me company that the nurses gave me when they installed my port. Usually at this time, I start thinking about all the things I'm thankful for, because in the morning is by far my favorite time in the hospitalization. First of all, what you gotta know about mornings in the hospital is it's very quiet. So at night, there's usually a host of staff members coming into your room. And then in the mornings before roughly 4 a.m., there's a host of other staff members that come into the room to check how the medications have been doing throughout the night. And there's something about the 5 a.m. shift where nobody bothers you and you just get that quiet time to reflect. And usually the first nurse comes in around 6:15, right before shift change, to ask if you need anything by shift change. So you'd think that hospitals are a place to relax, rest, recover, sleep in. But the reality is that they're not. So I know that if I've got about 20 minutes to go before the next nurse comes in, it probably makes sense to disconnect myself from my machine. So what you need to do for those of you who are about to be hospitalized, knock on wood, is you need to understand the difference between a red cap and a blue cap. So a blue cap essentially says, hey, your device is good to go. And you can address that on your port. And then the red cap stops the flow of blood. So if you do not do this in the correct order, you can completely bleed out and die right then and there. So nurses don't encourage you to learn this system. But what I do is you can simply tap it with the red cap, put the blue cap on, and then you can disconnect yourself from the machine. And I have this rule. It's a very interesting rule. And it says, never look like a patient when you're actually a patient. So I always have clothes from home. I put them on and I decide to get up and just simply go through a walk. And I find a back hallway that the security guard had showed me on my last visit. So the thing about hospitals is, does not matter if it's a A-grade quality hospital or one on a rougher part of town, the best part of every hospital is that back hallway. And the reason is this: number one, they've got the best views. Number two, nobody's there because nobody works out in the hospitals. And number three, it's actually really interesting where some of those hallways lead out to. And you usually find, because patients don't tend to take the stairs, the medical staff does, is it leads out into what I call the good cafeteria. So I put this sweater on, I go out to the good cafeteria. And the entire time I'm thinking about, how did I get here this time? Because over time you start to think, like, what were the choices that I had made that maybe I can make less of to prevent the next hospitalization? Regardless of how my body does, there are certain things that could have led me to where I am. And the only thing I can think about is, do I sign this sheet of paper? Do I literally give up my hopes, my dreams, everything I thought I wanted to be, everything I fought for, being a rural Iowan of an uneducated college family? Send a message on, at the time, I believe it was MSN Messenger. There's a group of cystic fibrosis community called the Salt Lick. And that's called the Salt Lick because if you were to right now, please don't do this, but if you were to come up to me and rub against my skin and then lick your finger, it's going to taste like salt because I have a sodium and chloride imbalance. So all the athletes with cystic fibrosis were called the Salt Lick because when we run, and you'll see this on my Instagram, if I'm wearing black leggings, it looks as if I've got dandruff everywhere, but it's really just the salt perspiring out of my clothing. So I'm on the Salt Lick and I talked to my best friend. My best friend is a guy named Chris. And it has been almost a decade that him and I have been inseparable today. And I've never met him because the thing is if you meet other people with CF, you don't know what bacteria is harboring in their lungs. They don't know what bacteria is harboring in your lungs. So you just don't meet because of the cross infection. There's a huge movie on it. If any of you guys want to watch a great movie, it's called 5 Feet Apart. Technically, as you all know now, it is called 6 Feet Apart, but it didn't sound good enough for Hollywood, so they changed it to 5 feet apart. But scientifically, it was 6 feet apart. So you never meet anybody with cystic fibrosis. It's a very isolating condition. Every time I'm hospitalized, it's basically me alone in a room. In order to come visit me, you have to wear the hazmat suit, the entire works, no hugs, nothing like that. So it's a completely lonely disease. And I message Chris and I go, I don't know what to do. This is my situation. And I say, they call it end stage. And he says, idiot, sign the fucking paperwork. And I go, but you don't understand. Like, I have ambitions, I have goals. I can't sign the paperwork. Like, that means I'm giving up everything to file for Social Security disability. Like, my family was the first family in my lineage who didn't make it a point of their own life satisfaction to be on the paperwork and to take the tax money. What did they fight for if I'm back on the system? Like, what, we lasted half a generation? And he goes, let's take a step back. What got you here this time? And I was thinking about it. Spending 12-hour days for a biotech and pharmaceutical firm here on the East Coast doing 100% of their corporate recruiting and training for salespeople. My job, and I was very good at it because wait for the click, my job was to recruit nurses in hospitals and convince them to switch hospitals for a different staff. Now, quick, captive audience. I'm there 2 weeks every couple months. You know, I knew how to convince the nurses that they hated their shift. They come into the room, you say, how's your day? If they look at all stressed, you can simply say, hey, did you hear about a prior auth position? Like, I don't care what you do either way, but like, at least I know companies that'll treat you better because I live here too. I was a baller in recruiting and I had an unlimited territory. And the thing is the way that insurance companies went, they had to rotate me on hospitals. So the companies I used to work for when I did biotech pharmaceutical recruiting, I would get put in the hospital that they wanted to recruit the talent out of. So we structured that entire thing. And then eventually I wound up recruiting salespeople to convince them to take over for me and recruit the nurses because I needed the good nurses in order to live. So I was working 12-hour days at a biotech pharmaceutical firm located just a couple miles from here. And I was sick. I had just moved to California in order to be their #1 employee in that territory. And if I'm being real with y'all, I failed miserably. I could not start the accounts. I could not sell the accounts. I could not work the accounts. And I was spending more time that year in hospitals than I could in the apartment I could barely afford. And I remember one night, clear as day, I was driving home and I had decided just to get fast food, just end the misery, right? And as I did, I called up a different friend, and she happens to be an attorney who specializes in getting people on the system when they have cystic fibrosis. Beautiful woman. And as we were talking, I felt that all too familiar tickle in my lungs. And I knew it wasn't going to be good. So I tried to hold it back. And then I started coughing, and I muted the line. And when a cystic fibrosis woman coughs, first of all, it's not the most attractive thing. And I looked down, and instead of it being infected mucus, which is green and disgusting, it was blood. I had two choices. Wipe the steering wheel, wipe my hands of it, go back to work the next morning, take an Ambien, or go to the ER. And I chose the ER. And I learned that night my lung function was a dangerously low 38%. And as they hooked me up to that nasal cannula, the doctor says, this is end stage. There's no more antibiotics for you. If I were you, I'd file. You've had a good run. Remember those words. You've had a good run. He walked out and the social worker walked in. That's how I got there. So I'm walking through to the good cafeteria and I see Sandy, and Sandy's the same lady who's taken my food order every time, probably every hospitalization, 2 meals a day, a couple hundred hospitalizations at this point, a couple hundred meals and hospitalizations at this point. And we always do the same little dance as I go to get a coffee, because you got to get the good coffee with the International Delight Creamer. And I walk to the register and I start to fumble for some money in my pocket. And she's always like, your money's not good here. And I go, this is your job. And she goes, yeah, but I'm also a mom. And then we just pretend, and her register somehow breaks. And I know I'm not getting charged. And I just steal the coffee and I walk back to my room. And as I walk back to my room, I remember thinking, I can't sign. So I got back on the Salt Lick and I go, they say it's end stage. I don't know what to do. I couldn't tell them that Chris said I needed to sign because this is my best friend. And I go, what do you guys do when you're in the hospital? Because like, I'm looking, this is going to be a long run. This is going to be a very long run. And I remember just thinking, God, if you exist, if there is a God, give me the sign. And the sign was very clear. One person in a group of 500 patients replied, lowest performing post I've ever done on social media, ask JB. And he goes, I play video games. That should horrify all of you, that if your only hope in life is to play video games because you're dying. So I called Chris and I go, I cannot sign. And the thing about Chris that we love is he's an attorney. So he knows how to convince me of things. And he says very clearly, you're not seeing the big picture. You see, what I'm not sharing is there was a drug, and at the time it was called Kalydeco, and it was coming to the market. What it did is it was thought to rewrite the genetic code. So if I'm what is called a homozygous 508, meaning I have 2 copies of this cystic fibrosis gene, if this drug were to work in my body, I just had to live long enough to see it through the clinical trials. And he goes, cut your dreams, cut your ambition. That's ego, give it up, get on the system, sell your house, sell your car, because you can only have $1,400 in assets at the point. And he's like, just live to see the drug come to market. If you do that, you could potentially consider yourself rewriting history. And it clicked. Your perspective can either be your passport or your prison. And the options I had in that moment were sign the paperwork, just live, or play video games. So I signed, lost everything. There's no word. I don't know what you guys went through. I don't know what you came in here today. I don't know what the pandemic did to you. I don't know what your businesses have been like, but if you're an entrepreneur, I know it hasn't been a straight climb to the top. I know there's been some peaks and a lot of valleys. And losing everything I fought against was my deepest valley. I remembered going on territory calls with my dad. He was a Pitney Bowes rep when they were trying to change from mailing systems to some of their certified postage meters. And uneducated hillbilly, we'll just call a spade, Google him on Facebook, like it's gonna be very clear. 5'10", 300 pounds, missing teeth, like that is my family. And love it or hate it, every single month when my dad's quota got renewed or his territory changed, we had to move, he never complained. He showed up, he sold. And I always wondered how he could get through it. My mom worked for, I can't say it legally, and you're about to find out why, but she worked the 3rd shift so that way somebody could visit me in the hospitals during the day. And I remembered her arms had given out, her wrists gave out from carpal tunnel. So she used to show up for work and type with her teeth. And what was interesting is I never once heard them complain about a Monday, ever. And the day I filed was a Sunday night. I sent a resignation letter to the CEOs of that recruiting firm. They never responded. They liked one of my YouTube videos, so it's okay. They'd never responded. And my coworker, Jen, texted me and said, lucky you, I hate Mondays. And I always remembered how my parents never complained once about a Monday. My dad would drive these territories because all they cared about is that we had enough money to figure out the medical bills. And my mom, when she wasn't working 3rd shift or visiting me in the hospitals, I'd come home and I would literally see her on the phone negotiating with medical billing companies constantly. That was never dad's job because he got a little too opinionated, but my mom would try to figure out what they needed and then figure out what we had based on how well my dad did on quota that month. And they would sit there and they would spend hours trying to negotiate just enough so that I could afford medication. There was a time I was so sick and they did not have money that they took my dog to the vet and pretended my vet was sick so they could get or my dog was sick so they could get the antibiotics for me because the dog was 120 pounds and I was 118. So they figured it's an even exchange. And I remember thinking, I've signed, but now what do I do with this signature? Because the truth of the matter is I did not want to let my parents down for everything they fought for and all the principles they taught me. What good does it do if I failed knowing that how much they've sacrificed for me? And it was about 6 months later, I got the message from Chris. The FDA approved the drug. Get on it. And I'm thinking, I did it. Holy shit. Sorry at home. I actually lived long enough to see this drug come to market. So I told my parents, I told everybody, like, when you're allergic to 4 out of the 5 antibiotics that treat you, you start to look into experimental medication called Phages Therapy, which was actually discovered in World War II. You look like you're familiar with phages. Actually discovered in the sewer system of World War II. And what these are like super bacteria that eat viruses. And you get so incredibly desperate that you will do anything to get a phage because there is no other options for you. And the drug was approved, so I just got to live long enough to now get the approved drug. And there's a guy, I met him this morning. He is 2 streets up, and his name is Dr. Ben Chang. And I sent him my phages, and he paid for it out of his own pocket to test what was in my lungs to see if there was anything that he could find from a Romanian sewer system to put into my body on the hopes that I could live. And he did. So we were going down that work, and I had put in all my paperwork for this drug that was approved, this genetic modulator, and I got a denial letter. And so what they don't tell you when you get a denial letter for a life-saving freaking drug is that the price tag of this for somebody on Social Security disability is unattainable. This drug, ladies and gentlemen, was $259,000 a year. It is now $314,000 a year. I don't have it. My parents don't have it. EO San Diego tried to create a fundraiser. They got close. But even so, I can't take your money if it's only going to give me another year. So I tried to tell my dad, hey, listen, this just isn't going to work out. I'm not going to take the drug. I don't want to bankrupt all the people. Like, what's the point of living if you just bankrupt everybody you love? And he understood. And he reminded me of an ad that I had found when we were in hospitals. There's, do you guys remember Selling Power magazine? Anyone remember that? Okay, so it's old school. But there was this ad, and I don't remember who it's by, like Frank Carrassus or something like that. But you open up the magazine, and it's a trifold, and it was a giant fortune cookie. And the diabetic in me loves sweets. And it said, in life, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you can negotiate. And I always remember thinking, like, wow, what if you could negotiate things? And I started thinking, how do I get this drug? So what I did, I've got a flair for the dramatic, is I started a hashtag called #Don'tKillKaylin. A little dramatic. It went viral, and we kept pushing it because everybody could relate to the young 20-something blonde dying chick who just wants the drug to extend her life, and it got denied because of cost. So #Don'tKillKaylin went so viral, in fact, that NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt flew out to the hospital to visit me. It was interesting. They actually had to push the production back because the Pope wound up being in town that day. We're like, we got it. And then they asked if I could extend my hospitalization. I'm like, I ain't going anywhere. And that night, the drug appeared not only for me, but for everybody in my financial situation for the entire state of California. And that was when I truly fell in love with the ability to negotiate and the ability to sell. And sure, it seems like it was social media, like a silly little coming of age story, but in the reality is it has now, and I freak out saying this, 18 months since my last hospitalization. I have taken that, thank you. I have taken all of that, plus some of the sales stuff that I've learned in these hospital walls, and I've created the workshop you guys are about to experience. I remembered there was a time, and I tell this every keynote so you can watch years and years back. There was a time I was about 13 years old. And at the time at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics, you have to go downstairs every day to work out, because the number one way to get rid of any infection in your lung is to cough the infection up and out. And they had treadmills. We were facing each other. This was before we knew the rules about social distancing. Oops. And ironically, it was in the morgue too. So figure that out. Like the morgue was next to it, and then there was the exercise room for the CF kids. And at the time, there was my treadmill, and there was this kid named Jake. And Jake was about 6 or 7 years old. And I would run on my treadmill because my logic was, hey, the more I can run, the more I can cough, the more I can just get all of this infection out. But a lot of CF people couldn't run, especially with the PICC lines. They can get infected, it's gory. And Jake was about 6 or 7 at the time, and he was always on the treadmill facing me. And one day Jake showed up and he was wearing an oxygen mask. And I remember thinking, he's so young, why would he, of all people, need a mask? And nonetheless, every single day he would show up and he'd give it his best run. And then one day Jake showed up and he goes very clearly, and he goes, one day I want to run like you can. What kills me to this day is he was put on a ventilator that weekend and died. When JB blessed me to come to New Jersey, I didn't elect to share this part of it, but I found out his dad was in sales and was so busy with meetings trying to make quota that day that he missed the last day his son was alive. And it makes me think actually a lot there's a saying, it's not personal, it's business. I'm here to tell you guys, no, it's personal. The ability to sell and sell well is very personal. Because when we're an entrepreneur and we have a sales force, sales isn't just about spreadsheets. Sales is the ability to take off without any financial concerns and take your kid to soccer practice. Sales is the ability that you don't have a boss that you're worried if you take an extra couple hours that your quota is not going to bankrupt you. The ability to sell and sell well is so insanely personal to all of us and the quality of lives we live that saying will no longer be allowed for the rest of this day. And I highly encourage you all to take that back in your teams, because sales is so personal to afford us the quality of life that we deserve that it is unfathomable. So I'm looking at this food and it looks very tasty. So we're going to take a break, but I want to leave you with what's going to start when we get back into this. Because it's one thing to tell inspirational stories all day, but it's another thing to remind you of a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, which says, "It is not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold in souls who know neither victory nor defeat." So when we get back, I have this rule. When you live a short life, the one thing I hate is going to a sales presentation or a seminar or a conference of any subject matter at that point, and you leave wishing they gave you more. If you're going to give up your lives to be here with me the next 2.5 hours or however long it goes, I want you to know you will be drinking from the faucet. The only negative reviews I've ever gotten about this presentation is I wish she would have halved it, but it is not my moral precipice to give you half of a seminar that you took your time to be here for today. So please raise your hand if there's any questions you have, anything you want to elaborate on, but that entire audit you filled out is what we go over today. So wherever you put not at all on, you can then very confidently change it to the other side of that, because this will be drinking from the faucet unlike any other sales seminar you've ever been to, guaranteed. So with that, get some food. Thank you. At being a millennial, there's going to be some really cheesy jokes in here. But really, I remember there was one workshop, I felt like I did a phenomenal job, like crushed it. And then somebody had come up to me afterwards and they were like, "Kaylin, don't get me wrong, you're great, and because you always know something's going to come after that. And I learn more at happy hour than I do through any seminar, because this is when it starts to apply to me. And that was my light bulb moment, because how it applies to you guys and what you take back to your forums and what you have these conversations on will mean night and day more than anything I can teach you. So if there's a point that you like, you can take your sales audits back. I've just kind of done a little bit of a glance to them. But if there's a point that you like, just make an asterisk or a star to bring it up in your next forum meeting and get their round robin ideas on it, because there could be that one extra thing that they say that maybe I didn't hit home on, just because we are dealing, employees from 1 to 170 and then different styles and models. So that's what the one guy said, just take it back to your forums. And then a soapbox. Anybody know where the term soapbox came from? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So that's when they say that modern sales was invented, right? So soapboxes used to be these really strong structures that, get this, they carried soap in, if anybody's wowed yet. And what they would do is they would go to the town center and they would actually get the pastors of the churches to go out and stand on a soapbox. And then they would start yelling at everybody in the town with the thoughts that whoever could scream the most and the best stuff about their God could get the most people into their church to tithe. And that's how a lot of people started to associate themselves with one specific church, and how churches started to grow was people on their soapboxes. So when we take a look at everything that you're going to learn today, a lot of this I've learned in the hospitals, and a lot of it is just random soapboxes from expert sales training seminars, research. I've studied a ton, sorry, Yale, but about Harvard Business Review. They have some really good sales books that come out. So if there is anything that I do share, if it's got a percentage, it came from one of those sources. Salesforce every year. Who uses Salesforce in here? Anybody use that CRM? Okay. At the very least, if you don't want to drop 100 grand and then plus 200K in integration software to get a new CRM, at the very least, sign up every year for their state of the sales report. It is roughly anywhere from 30 to 100 pages of really good analytics about the state of sales and executive briefings. So a lot of my statistics will come from that. HBR, there's a blip from, goodness gracious, you'll see it quoted later on. I believe it's Dreamforce also, so just be unaware of that. So this is what we're gonna learn today. Here's the deal. This is a lot of stuff. Given my options, I could teach on this stuff for 2+ days. It is the most exciting stuff in the world to me. I nerd out constantly. Every single one of these bullet points, from recruiting strategies, sales playbook creation, scaling systems and processes, was on your audit. So I tell you that because if there's anything we do not have time for, just simply look at your audit and do the inverse. So for example, we can identify and track sales talent easily and effortlessly. If your answer is a no, and you're really struggling in recruiting, you might look at that and say, oh, that's some piece of the puzzle for me to figure out. So just inverse it if we do not have time to go over that. And then of course, absolutely no charge, just email me if there's ever a template you need. So what my company does is we create kits. You guys has anybody heard of Book in a Box? Okay, so it's like sales management in a box. So any single one of these is also a template and a kit that we say if we accidentally hired an idiot sales manager, they would know what to do day one if they just piece their templates together. So that's the way the entire infrastructure of today's training goes. And if it looks like or something is not relevant, it's okay. Like, I'm not offended. Just say, Kayla, next slide, and we move on, because there's enough good juice here for all of you to at least take away a couple of things into your forums and to talk about on your next soapbox. So we're going to start off with a little executive briefing, what sales is really like now. Yeah, the pandemic changed stuff, but I'm not going to go on that because some of the principles are still the same, right? Paradox and pitfalls. This is where most entry-level sales managers go wrong and where a lot of the senior guys just forget over time. And then into recruiting strategies. Here's the thing about the recruiting strategies. Most of the presentation, unless you guys tell me otherwise, will be in the recruiting strategies. And that's simply because I was agency trained. And then when I was in hospitals and I lost my ability to make an income, what they don't tell you about Social Security disability is your check, regardless of where you live, is based on what you've previously earned. So at roughly 25, when I filed, I got $1,300 a month living in Southern San Diego from the government. So that was it. Like that's car, housing, food, all of the lovely stuff. It was that little. Now, as you guys know in EO, you can't survive, much less some of the most expensive cities in America at that point. So what I did is I convinced EO members to let me recruit their sales staff in exchange for Amazon gift cards. That is no longer valid, by the way. So when you get into recruiting strategies, it's a lot of the headhunting stuff that I learned early on from different agencies that allowed me to be successful, and then that I modified for EO, Vistage, and YPO members when I was schlepping it, we'll call it. And then sales playbook creation. How many of you guys have heard Jack Daly speak and you know you need a sales playbook? Yeah, everybody. True story. Yeah, bam, you don't know Jack. He's a good mentor of mine. During some really tough times, he let me go to his workshops for free. And I would just sit there in the front row and take pages and pages of notes. So he is a hero of mine. He's an idol of mine. He's invited me to his house to have way too much wine on multiple occasions. But what I found is, yeah, I didn't know Jack, but I also didn't learn how to create a sales playbook. I just learned I needed to know one. So where there is a difference for any of you who've been through his stuff, is this the same stuff? No, I actually get into the nuts and bolts and structure of what you need to know to create a sales playbook. And then lastly, what do you do with all that and how do you scale it? That was actually a photo the day that I filed for Social Security. So what's interesting about hospitals also is you still get crappy brown trays, blue socks, and chocolate milk with every meal. So over 20 years, some things never change. Any guesses from what you've seen in your own world of why salespeople quit? I mean, just curious out of this. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, who else is a sales manager? Who else is a sales manager? Well, maybe today you'll get closure on why, JB. Who's currently doing sales in their company? Who's the only one actually doing sales in their company? Okay, all right. Sometimes one person, that's funny. Some groups, that's interesting because the entrepreneurs are like, I'm the salesperson, the sales manager, the entrepreneur, and the like, well, they use different words there, but we're gonna go on. So yeah, so it's interesting. There was a study done, I believe, by Robert Half. For those of you who do not know, Robert Half is this incredible recruiting firm. They are world renowned. They're one of the best in the industry for their hiring practices. They are also the most expensive. So should you want to use Robert Half, you will pay anywhere from 25 to 33% of annual realistic first year earnings to recruit. So if you're going to use an agency, at least know what you're doing with the people when they come in, or else it will be a giant money suck. But they had found that 80% of salespeople quit because of, anybody guess it? You can call it that. Temperament. 87% of the salespeople on your team will quit because their temperament is not manageable by the sales manager. And then inside temperament comes coachability. So we'll get into how to work on the temperament, how to get the coachability. But the thing about temperament and coachability with salespeople is if you don't know what you're coaching them on, and then what you're coaching and training them on isn't in line with how they're actually paid, you have a broken system. So many times sales or sales managers go out and they say, oh, we need training. Well, how much training do you need? 5 hours. How often? Every week. And that sounds good in theory, but if you're not training to how they're compensated, there's going to be a disconnect, and it could lead to, as you had said, micromanagement, or my favorite, the illusion of micromanagement, or more commonly with EO members, we call it the idea monkey generation. So let's just train them on anything so we can say that we said we trained them, but it doesn't necessarily equate. So all of these pieces of these puzzles will kind of start to click, and you'll get to mess with some of these. Just for the former sales managers in the group. Which one does everyone relate to? Yeah. I always said for inbound companies that don't rely as heavily on prospect, I always say like zoo-fed animals, hit or miss. But yeah, herding cats is the last one. How many of you guys get the majority of your sales through inbound leads versus outbound? Mostly an outbound prospecting group, I'm guessing. Okay, seeing more head nods for that. Here's the deal, there's pitfalls and paradoxes. The interesting thing about sales management is take a second to think about on your team, the salesperson that was there, did they get promoted to do less of what they originally were told to do more of? Let me think that through. So on many situations, Daly says it best, they promote the salesperson and they keep them in charge of managing their own accounts while they now manage the team. Okay, so a lot of head nods on that. Awesome. So that would be called what they have a paradox. So you get paid for doing less of what you got promoted for doing more of. So usually the best salesperson is the worst manager because it's completely different skill sets. And there are 4 different tasks of a sales manager. So there's different stages of it. The first stage, and we'll get into it in a couple slides more in depth, but the first stage is when you keep the sales manager in charge of selling on all accounts. I'm here to tell you, regardless of the size of the company, it's never a good idea. And you're going to go into more detail as to why, but that is one of the biggest paradoxes. Calling the old accounts or having quotas, promoting the top salesperson to the manager. And then the number one thing that many entrepreneurs start out and they start to struggle with is they say that the real job as a sales manager is to grow sales, which is a big problem if COVID didn't explain that enough, because once the market changes and they're still in charge of growing sales, you wonder why is it happening the way it is. So there's a thing called leading indicators and lagging indicators. Have you guys heard of this? Okay, so everybody does. So when you get back into your companies and this goes through, just remember the job is not to actually grow the sales, but it's to grow the indicators that lead to the sales. And in section 4, when we start talking about KPIs and processes, you're going to get a lot more information on that. So that's the flow of the day. So it comes down to what are the 4 things you can do daily to scale your sales force or to prevent fires? What have you guys found? What's something you can do every single day to focus on scaling your sales force? You can just yell it out. Training, perfect. Who else? I like that. Okay. I'm gonna put that under training because to me it seems like motivation and guidance. What else you got? Okay. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I'm trying to scale my sales force. I assume it means increase the numbers.
Cool.
And so have a sales process for employees as well as sales process for prospects.
Beautiful. Awesome. So I'll put that under. Who else? Cool. All right, so you guys got it all. Usually it takes people a little longer. Now, what's interesting is you guys have heard of the reflection, right? So what you see in the world is actually who you are, or else you wouldn't have recognized what you saw, right? So if I look at Jeffrey and I simply say like, oh, he must be a really strong manager. Well, I wouldn't have recognized that in him if I didn't see it in me at all. So what's interesting is some of these things, this is immediately what's going to come to your mind when we start getting into the actual tactics. I don't have the fill in the blank. If you go to take it back to your sales force right now and you're like, hey team, you got to work on this. What are they going to tell you? Yeah, thank you. I can't afford to, there you go. Can't afford to change, can't afford to lose sales. It's been like this. Always been like this. Any other excuses that your team typically brings to you? Oh, that's a great one. Who said that? Okay, perfect. Any others you can think of? Okay. Okay. Oh, that's a good one. Anyone else? Okay. So the reason I bring all of this up is because there will be things you want to implement, and your team is going to fire these excuses back at you. The entire concept of today is to be so proactive and strategic that if you are on the phone with a customer per se, you know that your customer is going to give you all of these excuses back, right? In sales, we typically call them objections. Well, the exact same objections that your customers are going to give your salespeople are going to give you when you try to create change. So if I were to guide the salespeople on what you do, well, what do? You come up with the own answer to the objection and you put it out there before it even happens. Before you take any of this back in your company, try to anticipate what they're going to say back to you and already have that answer preloaded. Here's a formula for that. So this is your first meat on the bones situation. The formula goes, I understand and the benefit back what are your thoughts? So if they go, I don't have the time, for example, let's say you're going to talk to your sales manager about recruiting principles and they tell you, yeah, but I don't have the time. You can simply say to them, I understand that you may not think you have the time. And the reality is this will free up your time. So what are your thoughts on how we can free up your time? And you spin it. So if you want more information on that, that's what's called a ledge statement. You can Google ledge statement. It was popularized by Jeb Blunt in the book Prospecting. So a ledge statement is a 3-step turnaround for any time you're trying to get inside the mind of somebody else. Politicians use it in changing the entire dynamic of the conversation. So that way they don't have to address the actual issue. So if you have a sales manager saying, I don't have the time, I understand this will free up more of your time, sharing the biggest benefit to them. What are your thoughts on how we can free up the time? Now they're no longer thinking about the excuse that they came to you with, but they're trying to automatically think about how they flip that question and find solutions. Anybody have questions yet? Oh, it gets way. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. Ledge, L-E-D-G-E. And literally it's 10 steps forward. I get so excited. Can you tell? Okay, so at the end of this, you guys get insane amount of templates. You also get a video to watch, and then you get my recommended reading list. So this concept of the ledge statement was popularized by Jeb Blunt, but then it was reintroduced by a book called The Accidental Sales Manager by Chris Lytle, L-Y-T-L-E. So you'll get a very comprehensive reading list at the end of this too, in case any of you guys are suckers for punishment and you're like, wow, that wasn't nearly enough. Okay, 4 stages of management. This was actually popularized also by Chris Lytle with some like infusion from the late Chet Holmes. Chet Holmes, for those of you who do not know, wrote The Ultimate Sales Machine, then went on tour with Tony Robbins. And what he did is he created a succinct amount of systems and processes that think of like gears. And so as one gear turns, another gear turns in the same direction. So all ships on the sail, Simon Sinek said, all the same butts on the same seat, going in the same direction, same philosophies. A lot of the excuses that we've already uncovered will actually come because most of the sales managers are in their stage 1. Stage 1 essentially says that this sales manager is unable to find the time or to not have the excuses because they're spending so much time actually selling, which is why it becomes kind of one of those paradoxes and those pitfalls that we talked about previously. So non-management duties basically mean they're still a salesperson, but they were promoted to manager. Typically, if you've been to Jack Daly's stuff, the reason they were promoted to manager because they were good at what they did, but they failed to understand that it's actually 2 distinct personalities and styles. So you can tell right now as you think about your team, so you maybe think about yourself in your team. If you are spending most of your time selling or trying to help your team sell, the reason your sales force has not scaled is because you are actually working so hard on the non-management duties that the scalability just isn't there. Stage 2 is sales support and firefighting. Here's the thing, but Kaylin, my business is so reactive, I always have to firefight. Okay, cool story, bro. Has it occurred to you that some of you may be starting fires just so you can put them out? And if that is not you, that could be people on your team. There is a digital marketing agency that I've been lucky enough to work with where the CEO would go to, this actually cracks me up every time. Any seminar, any audible, anything, any vacation, come back and fuse 100 ideas back into his company and then wonder why everyone got upset at the last minute, but he wanted to feel so valued in his own organization because it had grown so fast that he had to start the fires so he could jump in and save them. And it was completely an unconscious sabotage. Now, firefighting is great. We need it. We absolutely need it. But here's the thing. This is proactive. An amazing sales manager will schedule the firefighting. So if there's emergencies that are coming up and they know that a busy day for prospecting or a busy day of leads is usually on Mondays and Wednesdays, they're going to plan all their fires on Tuesdays and Thursdays. At the end of this, you will get a calendar of a proposed idea for how your sales manager can literally structure their entire month to allow for all 4 stages of sales management that still allow that growth curve. So it's completely templated out in about an hour. So if you're going to firefight and you're going to do sales support, you're going to talk to upset customers, plan it on Tuesday and Thursday for 4 hours. Like, that's it. And at the very least, that'll keep you on top of your schedule. Third, somebody had said it earlier, is the development, staffing, and training side of it. And then the fourth is strategic market planning and analysis. This is also being a customer for all of your major competitors and actually going through all of their funnels. So if it's, I'm just going to take a guess here, if it's your guys' company, retail wine selling, you go to all of the other people selling wine and you experience what it's like from the customer's journey for your target market. Many times the growth is actually in stages 3 and 4. So the majority of this workshop is going to talk about stages 3 and 4, but also recognize far too often, especially in EO companies. And by that, usually it's under 10 million in revenue. So if that's a helpful gauge for you guys. Typically, if it's under 10 million in revenue, usually the entrepreneur is still the sales manager and they get stuck in here. And then they go on a conference or a cruise or something like that. They come back, they try to implement the ideas, they get stuck, and then they go back to the firefighting. And they're very few times able to break through and just focus on the analysis and planning. So we'll refer to the 4 stages of management quite a bit. In stages 3 and 4, so the majority of the rest of this workshop, that's primarily what your entire calendar looks like. And if done right, that entire calendar will be filled up to the point where you don't have time to be in the field anymore, and you definitely don't have time for firefighting. So if you take, what is the average salary out of curiosity for any of your sales managers? Can any of you share that? What do you guys pay your sales managers?
Back on our one sales manager, who also person. It's a strict profit share, open book accounting, and controls what project sales price is, and he knows what cost of the business is going for. So he controls how much he earns.
Perfect. Thank you. What else do you guys got? What did you make as a sales manager?
So I was the top salesperson, maybe salesman twice. And so in one of them, they convert all my accounts to house accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made the override of what the salesman made as a base salary. That was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
So that's very instructive at this point. But when I was sales, last time I was a sales manager, he got 1,000.
Cool.
And that was 19.
Perfect. Thank you. So to JB's point, and what was your name? Yeah. Stuart? Okay. Yeah. So to the point, I don't even know if you guys can see this, so I'm just going to move it. To the point of that, there are 3 typical patterns. It's either base plus commission, straight base, no commission, no bonus. Base plus bonus, not commission. And then lastly is profit share or incentives. What's interesting is when you're on a profit share, and it's going to be different for everybody, but when you're on a profit share or commission only or bonus only situation, it actually opens them up to have more excuses. So that way they can justify if they're not spending a lot of time in stage 3 and 4. What sucks is the stage 3 and 4 tasks that are accountable to most strategic sales growth it's hard to articulate unless you know all your KPIs, how much they should be paid. So in a traditional model, so B2B, B2C, or agency, unless it's a leaner company, I'll always advise against profit share. Base and bonus, it has to be a bonus based on growth of the company team, not the individual person's account. So if I have 10 salespeople and this year we've made 5 million, but the CEO says, actually, this year we need to be 7.5 million, that extra 2.5, if attained, is what I get bonus on. And then you better make sure my bonus is sweet if you're going to pay me a lower base. You can go to, here's the best way. They tell you to go to Glassdoor to find out what you should pay your sales managers. No, that typically, like, that's insane. What you want to do is to find out what the true base of your sales manager should be. This is recruiting tip number 1. Create a fake resume of what your ideal sales manager is and apply on LinkedIn and see how much people are willing to offer that person. So if you know, yeah, we getting street proven here. So for example, if I wanted to be a sales manager for that digital marketing firm, I will list all of my responsibilities as if I'm currently that person. And then I'll apply to every district sales manager for any other agency. And I will fake interview with them to find out what that base salary is. Because if they're not going to work for you, they're going to work for your competitor. So when you think in terms of salary, do not think in terms of, hey, we have X amount, we should see what we can do with it. Think, is this person worth losing to the competitor at this rate? So when they say set your prices, I loved this. As a speaker, they say, you know, set your prices on your perceived value. I've heard that about 1 billion times. Not necessarily bad advice, but when you set your prices on your perceived value, well, it's up to you guys if you decide this is valuable or not. What I wanted to do is I wanted to scope my competition, and I just wanted to outsell my competition. So if you even think of it as basic as what I'm doing here today, I set my prices based on other speakers at my percentage to see if I could beat them or not. So every single thing I talked to you guys about how selling is personal, every single thing we do when it comes down to how to create the strategy behind it, think about, if you don't do it in one way, what will your competition do it as? And it's very easy on LinkedIn, rather than Googling base salary, to just apply with a fake resume. So jumping into the recruiting. Okay, good. Jumping into the recruiting, onboarding improves retention by 25%, performance by 11. What's interesting, guess the average tenure of a salesperson right now. Average tenure. A year? That's a good one. Who else? What'd you say? Oh, probably short, yeah. 18 months. I'll spare you guys the joy of that, but 18 months. So when we talk about, there's something called the turnover costs. I do have, if you want to Google, put a little asterisk down, Google turnover cost calculator, and it'll come up. You can put in things like your company size, the average size of your sales force, the amount of sales you personally get, and you can figure out about what it costs to turn over an employee. Now, turnover costs are not just base salary. So there are many different ways to recruit. Some of those are obviously recruiting fees, training costs, upkeep, desks, etc. So in a really excellent company, you're going to find that sales tenure is there for over 3 years. Anybody right now have salespeople that stay with them over 3 years? Okay, so a couple of you, mainly because it's just you, right? Well, you're ahead on the curve there. Yeah. Yeah, so you got to figure it out. Yep. Who has read Profit First? Okay, so everybody got it. Great book, and it's the same concept. So when you set your prices for your sales team, yeah, set them according to what the competition could get them on the open market for, but also recognize, kind of like how JB did, what do you actually need to make it happen, and then find that difference. So the average turnover for an SDR is 97,000. And you're thinking, how is that the case? Well, go to the calculators, you can type in your numbers and figure that out. But those who can onboard reps within 3 months or less typically see a 29% increase in that power score. So what that means, for those of you who may be lost, basically, you're going to spend a heck of a lot more if you can't onboard somebody within 3 months or less. There is a way as we get through this with training where we took the average hire and onboard time from the first day. It used to be roughly 2 months. We took it down to 4.1 days. So we say if we accidentally hire an idiot, can they be phone ready in a reasonably complex business landscape to be phone ready and able to talk to live customers in 4.1 days?
What do you mean by onboard? You mean that they're making a commission within 3 months, or that they're fully trained to sell a product within 3 months?
I would say fully trained and ready to talk to customers within 3 months. Yeah, the commission, it depends because some people only pay out on quarterly. So that's your own pay plan on it. But yeah, within 3 months. What is everyone's onboard time? Just out of curiosity. Okay, well, yeah, you guys got it down then. So yeah. Okay, so then the question comes, great, we know we got to train them quickly and onboard them, get them talking to customers ASAP so we cut down on those costs. But how do we actually find people? Recruiting tends to be people's biggest headache. This is also where, if I could nerd out, this is my favorite part of this workshop, simply because this is my world. I have a book if anybody really wants to nerd out. It's not on Amazon, it's just on my own desktop. And I believe it's 387 pages of how to recruit. It was pioneered off of a guy named Greg Doersching, who I'll be speaking with next month. He is the CEO of a company called Next Level Exchange. So in case you're all Klyn'd out, go to Next Level Exchange, tell them Klyn sent you. And it is roughly a very intense workshop on how to identify, recruit, and retain talent, all done virtually online. So you guys can just send your, whether it's an HR manager or in some sales forces, they say every Friday morning, because it typically is a little slower of a day, for 2 hours, every single person in the company needs to be on the phones, calling through databases or LinkedIn or looking through resumes to find that talent. We say it's that much because on average, you should have 3 times the amount of candidates in your pipeline for what you anticipate you need to hire. Next Level Exchange. And it's by a guy named Greg Doersching. He's now the CEO. And I can put that in the email recap too. Brilliant stuff. We're talking, I remember when I went through his training, check it, you guys want some fun stuff on this? I'll show you. So if you're trying to recruit somebody to join your company, and it's a cold call, so you don't know anything about this person, they teach you to come up, let's say, where are we at now? We're in New Haven, right? Are we in New Haven? Yeah, okay. So we're in New Haven and you're trying to recruit somebody here and they say, oh, but I prefer a big city. He literally bullets out 10 reasons why small cities are better than big cities to start a career. And then alternatively, he and his entire company has why big cities are better than small cities. So no matter what the candidate says back, there is a response to sell them on why the opportunity at New Haven is better than New York City. So small city, we can try this exercise because this comes also into your playbooks. What are some advantages of a small city? There we go. Now, quick business speak. What does a lower cost of living mean for you? You can pay less. Great job. What's another advantage of a small city? Traffic, brilliant. What were you about to say? Okay, give me one more. Quaintness, perfect. Quaintness, community, that sounds pretty. Okay, quick. Why is a big city better than a small city? More opportunities. That one could bite you just simply because there's more competition. So I would say in a big city, there's more growth internally. So I would just try to make it very micro. What's another big city advantage? Diversity, great. Anytime you want to add that in, especially about staff, add in the words industry experts. Okay, and then one more.
Energy, excitement.
I love that. So if I'm talking to XYZ candidate and they are working for my competitor, which I am going to poach from, in the email recap, there's literally an entire template you can use to poach people from your competitors. One thing that I might even have it, which would be fantastic. You can, bonus tip, go to Vistaprint and get a card, buy a business card. And on one side say, hey, great meeting you. Should you ever be interested in careers, please let me know for an immediate interview. I don't have it on me. And then the flip side of that is a QR code that goes directly to your company website and you're hiring. So when you're out at a restaurant, you see a great employee, or you go to a competitor's, or hint, you rent a taco truck for $500 and you go to your competitor's work site on lunch break and you say free tacos for anyone who submits their resume on this QR code. You can scan all of that data. Oh, it gets good. And then now, you know, if you did that in a big city and anybody says, oh yeah, I don't know if it's for me, I prefer the smaller cities, you've already got your rebuttals to why they might say that. Yeah, I understand that you love the hustle and bustle of the big city, but what you should know is the reason we can attract anyone to our city here in New Haven is it's got that quaintness and that community feel. And what's interesting about a community feel is you have the opportunity to advance quicker in your career than in a big city because there's so much competition. And you've already thought that through. So you can get on Vistaprint, they're $10. Great meeting you. If you're ever interested in a confidential interview, please let me know. I'd love to chat. And just sync it immediately to a QR code for your company website, or bonus points, get a Calendly account for free and you can sync it there. They say on average, you should be starting with 7 sources for any time you start to recruit salespeople. I just gave you guys a couple examples of sources. What are some of yours? Where do you guys find people? Cool. Do you actually use LinkedIn for recruiting?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you poach or do you just have ads?
So low, it's coaching.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. All right, what else we got?
It's 2 ways.
Yeah, it can get you.
Flip on the side, sword and dog on the sword. Yeah, because I started dying by the sword, I decided to step aside.
What's funny? There was some great companies to poach from. Don't get me started on industry experience. That's like another workshop, but great companies to poach from: Enterprise Rent-A-Car and ADP and Wells Fargo because of the trading behind it. But what was interesting is when you say live by the sword, die by the sword, we used to go into Enterprise and rent cars. And usually if you get there, which last night was a great example, I walked in and there's like 100 employees and none of them are really doing much because there's nobody that's going to show up at that hour. And we used to hand them those QR codes and say, also, if you refer your friends here, everybody gets a $500 recruiting bonus. So if you and like all your friends want to go, that's like $6,000. I know you make $3,000 a month, at least consider it. And we would just basically take out all the employees of an enterprise, which was fun for a while until my boss caught on to what I did and we got some very nasty letters from Enterprise. But the concept's still there. But I would get all my girlfriends and they just hit, this is in Florida, every Enterprise in the Orlando area. But what I didn't know is they gave the company cars from Enterprise for all of us. So if you hit your sales goals, you got a company car on lease. And I didn't realize it was through Enterprise. So that backfired on me. But it was really fun when it lasted, let me tell you. So there's that. So we've got LinkedIn. What else you guys got for ideas? Who's got the best recruiting story? Who's got like a really good recruiting story, or how did you find your top sales talent? There you go. Referrals is an amazing one. Internally, we always say, so my thing, and we'll get into it, I'll send you guys a clip also, is the top 3 ways to recruit. It's either push, pull, or build. And basically build says referrals. So we always offer, depending on the company size, anywhere from $500 to $1,500, just so we can avoid recruiting agencies. So you tell your team, true story. We'll put agency down here, even though it's my least favorite. True story on referrals. One of the companies that I worked for and was later fired for, the base salary was $25K. And what we found out was the recruiting bonus was actually $1,500 if you could refer talent to them. So we convinced a small group of people, we put an ad on Craigslist, and we would said, hey, come downtown, this was in Florida, come downtown for Wind Down Wednesday, and anybody you can get a resume for or an email address, we'll sync that to your information, and if we hire them, you get $1,000. So we would actually pay people $1,000 to find referrals for us, knowing that our actual budget was $1,500. So we would get that extra $500. So what's interesting about that is if you find a company that you think would be interested, so you go to Craigslist even, a mall job would be a great, retail could be great at this. If you tell your retail employees, hey, you'll make more money in recruiting for us than you will necessarily in your base pay as a bonus, and then you throw in extra perks, like they don't have to work a Saturday, or if they only want to work 4 hours on a Saturday, you can cut their hours an hour extra each day. And you tell them there's a big contest, we're going to pay you guys each $1,500 to bring in talent, or $1,000 if you can find somebody else to bring in that talent. They could actually make more than working for you, but it's only an employee perk. So you design it as an employee perk and an incentivization program. So stuff good? Are you guys into this? Okay, good. Yeah. I try to avoid saying that publicly, but yeah, totally. And what you find is the lower base performance person typically, and it's interesting, they typically tend to be more social and have more friends than the rest of us. And then they start making the money, and then it just comes down to, this is really easy. But that bonus is only for employee perks. So something to consider there. What's another method for bringing in talent? Anybody have any creative ideas?
So I once talked about a job, they weren't hiring, but it was something I was interested in. So I went to the family owner, talked to them to get a job.
Yeah.
I think part of it would be make your company attractive so that it's a desired place to work.
Totally. When we start talking about ads, remind me of that. Because since about 3 years ago, how many of you have noticed that the ads you're putting out to attract talent aren't getting nearly the ROI that they used to? Anybody else seen that? Do you use ads? Oh, it's horrible. Yeah. I'm gonna help you. So remind me in about 2 slides, but it has to deal with how the company looks on the ad. So there's a framework that we've found. I put in here, I believe, 100-to-1 ratio. There's a framework, and we say we want 100 resumes because out of those 100, arguably many are not going to be good. And then out of those 100, you're going to interview 10, at least pre-screen 10, to get 3 face-to-face to make that one offer. So if your ad's currently on at 100-to-1 ratio, there's a problem with your ad, and we're going to teach you how to do that. Now, unless it's super niche. So obviously for April back there, it's going to be so niche that it's like, Caitlin, there's no way I can get 100. Like, we understand, like, it's so interesting in that regard. But for retail, 100 shouldn't be too much of an issue if the ad's done right. Digital marketing, any trendy business, easy. Call center reps, absolutely. SDRs, absolutely, regardless of the niche. Yours might be interesting for that ratio, but I think you can get pretty close on that. Now, of course, here's the thing. If you put out an ad and that ad only nets 25 employees, okay, but 24 of them are great, well, then you don't have a problem. You're just looking for 10. I always like the buffer of 100 just in case a lot of them happen to suck. Or the easier you are to apply, what happens in the algorithms online, the easier it is to apply, that company, whether it's Indeed, Career Builder, Craigslist, LinkedIn, will actually push your ad out more because it says, oh, people really like this company. So it makes them look better as the opportunity for an ad partner. So their ratios go up. So they might start spamming your ads. So that's why 100's a decent level. Recruit 3 times the candidates of what's expected. So if you know what your busy season is, just be proactive enough that you've got 300 resumes going into busy season and equate it for the onboarding schedule, which again, when you get your calendar for your sales team and a couple slides, that's all built in. So all 4 stages are built in. 24-hour offer letters. This is an interesting one that sometimes I get pushback on. You know, when you're talking to an all-star, right? You never had to debate it in your head. You're not like, yeah, I think this person could be good, but they might be horrible. No, you know when you're talking to somebody that's great. I always have the offer letter literally in my inbox ready to send out. And for those of you who want to record it, this is what that call sounds like when you get it. Because many times if you're going against a competitor, you need to negotiate the offer letter and you got to do it immediately. So they leave the interview. And as they leave the interview, you give them a call and you say, hey, thank you so much for interviewing. We've got a couple days to decide, but what do you think? And you let them talk. What did you like? What did you not like? Do we agree on comp? And would you accept if offered? Hint, for some reason, women get away with this more than men. So just go with this next statement. If they say yes, they would accept if offered. I am sending it when they say yes. And then it goes, good news, because guess why I called? And then they accept it within 24 hours. And you tell them the CEO or the sales manager, whatever, is debating on another candidate, but you push them through. So hopefully they'll respond within 24 hours. I've never lost a negotiation with a salesperson when I send the offer letter as I'm talking to them on the phone in that format. Always start on a Wednesday or Thursday. Mondays, usually there's a lot of fires, or Tuesdays if you take the calendar. So by Wednesday and Thursday, usually the stuff's calmed down enough that you can get them started in training. And then if they're not in before 60 days or they're not making sales or generating revenue, for most businesses, I would advise cutting right away. How many of you guys have a story where you've held on to somebody maybe a little too long? Yeah. Some of you had some really interesting body language. I got to hear the story back there. What was your guys' story on that?
What's that on our guy?
Yeah.
Oh, we had two. We had success and we had failure. So middle coaches were going out and find themselves dying. So go there. All the industry recruiting guy, that's where John Marcus. He had existing accounts and whatnot. So we just hired another one about 90 days ago, and he lives in Boston, will not come down here to learn. Just not put the mileage on his car.
I hate him.
On a CRM, pipe drive. Asked him for what he has, there's like 7 things in 90 days. And I just laughed because he just said, cut the bait, because that's what I want to do at this point. But we paid their recruiter fee, so I feel like we're in the game and we should be trying to get our money's worth, but I think it's just the same shit. So
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, and it wasn't that. So you know you're not an all-star. It was sort of like, hey, the guys in the industry, you know, and we're thinking you would transition some of this accounts over. Well, the reason why it was not work is doesn't have any accounts.
Yeah.
Is it? It's just.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. So you said the word typical, which couple typical things to look for. So we call this a search parameter. As you can see on that, and I can send you guys an example search parameter. Search parameter says you only recruit for what your actual business needs, nobody else's advice. So top grading is great, but it's also not quite relevant for EO. We found out in a lot of companies. And that's simply because they're trying to do a style of interviewing where when many people just don't know what your company is, that level of scrutiny in the interview process just hasn't been as effective. So search parameters is the creation of your own top grading, essentially, format. So here's some red flags of salespeople. First red flag is they haven't worked in 30 days. Now, but COVID, I get it. I would like you to ask yourself, what is the longest amount of time that you've personally been able to go without trying to create revenue? Yeah, that literally, I don't even need to finish that. Yeah, at most 2 months. And my guess was, is you were actually trying, you weren't just sitting around. So if you're interviewing somebody and they have not worked for that long, nor have they driven an Uber or done something, they will get bored. Top producers get bored. I recruited nurses in the hospital because I was bored. So anybody that can go a long extended period of time without at least wanting or trying to create revenue typically isn't an all-star.
Would you say that's different for a sales manager than a sales?
100%. And it's tricky. If it was a sales manager who has not worked for an extended period of time, I want to know, I'm going to grill them on what they've learned in that amount of time, not what they've produced. So I'm going to say, okay, what books did you read? What's your podcast? What did you learn most from that experience? What charitable work did you get involved in? How did you keep your social calendar up? On the next slide, I believe it is. I don't know why I looked at that, like that's going to tell me. On the next slide, there's great interview questions that some will work for a sales manager also. But a great sales manager who spends time in 3 and 4 stages is going to be sitting around thinking of different puzzles to put together. So when I interview them, I need to look, what are the different puzzles that they've tried to solve in their time off? Does that help? Cool. Another absolute no-no, and this one's kitschy, so die by your sword. Here we go. Industry experience. Hate it for salespeople. Here's why. Because we care so much about if they understand the widgets that we're not asking what they've done with said widget. So anytime a recruiting agency, and it's just because I've been burned by so many of them, and I was trained by all of them. So also the accidental sales manager, Chris Liddell, there's another book, Paul Seiker, it's called Proactive Recruiting. Both of them go into their rants on why industry experience isn't right. What you want to ask is, what did they have to do in the first 30, 60, 90 days to be successful? And then what did they learn about your company and how would they implement what they've learned online or however they did it in 30, 60, 90 days? So regardless of, because I believe we can teach a lot of industry experience. If not, none of us would have it unless we're like aerospace engineers, and even that's teachable. I'd rather spend a month and a half on teaching them about the business than knowing that they've created results in the first 30, 60, 90 days. It's a good filter. Another thing is it's called the push-pull mentality. You want to look for people that are going towards something, not running away from something. So an example on a resume is if they've worked, remember the rule is 18 months. So you want to know that they can stick it around at least over 18 months. But you want to look for any increase in responsibilities or title, not into management, but a bigger team, a bigger territory, bigger responsibilities, bigger titles that show them that they've been able to take the skills and grow with it, as opposed to somebody who's been very flatlined. So in the interview, you'd ask, what are some of the additional things management gave you in that amount of time and what were the results? It's a big one. Feel like that was really long-winded. How are you guys doing? Do you need a break?
Just a question. So
Yeah.
it's basically saying you're looking for pure growth salespeople, not industry.
In this example, yeah. Because, and I don't know, what is your industry?
Trade show. We sell trade show.
Dude, you would have you heard of the ultimate sales machine? The entire concept was come out of the trade show industry and how to find people to work those booths at trade shows. And it is a revolutionary approach to how to sell out your company's products and services at a trade show. And so that's where a lot of this ideas and advice comes from. So Chet Holmes Ultimate Sales Machine, and it's completely a trade show driven business model. It came out about 15 years ago. And actually that was what put Tony Robbins on the map, because he implemented a lot of Chet's teachings. Because if you think of it, even though it is the seminar business for how he does it, like, yeah, I get it, personal growth, NLP, all that jazz. But when you take that and you actually break it down, all he's doing is he's going from city to city to city to grow his own workshops. And within each of those, he's actually bringing in speakers who do what Dan Kennedy popularizes speak to sell models. And it was all created by the brainstorm of Chet Holmes in that book. So you can also find, Red Book. I'll look on my computer, remind me, but he has an 18-hour seminar on that concept. And it is brilliant, like one of the best trainings I've ever done. So at the very worst case, I'll put it on a flash drive and mail it to you. Riveting. Because I watch this stuff in the hospitals because I'm not playing video games, right? And I remembered watching that thinking I wanted a trade show business because the level of tactic and intellect behind it, unfathomably great. So, okay, cool. What other questions do you guys have so far? Okay. This will also be in your recap. It's the 3 ways to get that talent pool, and then the push versus pull, and how to never, ever pay another recruiting fee again. And also how to know if a recruiting fee is a BSer. Because unfortunately, in the world of recruiting, there are some recruiting companies that frankly just suck, but because it is such a lucrative career, you don't know if they suck unless you know what questions to ask them. So I will send you guys this for your commute home. Has anybody heard of Charles Godet? Okay, another brilliant entrepreneur. And basically he actually worked with Tony for a while. And then he actually created a podcast called Beyond 7 Figures. He has a company called Predictable Profits. And him and I tag team constantly to talk about different ways to recruit and source sales talent that are very, like the taco truck, like have a taco truck show up and scan a resume for free applicants. Same exact concept. So this will be in your stuff. Ads. Okay, we got into that. The reason I am spending so much time on the recruiting is most of your guys' sales audits said you wanted to know mostly about recruiting. So if you guys are like, oh, I really came for another section, please speak up because I want you guys to get the value for this. But here's the thing about ads. Okay, yeah, 7 lines of recruiting, got it. There'll also be a copy of the ad. But the very first thing is, do you have your ad on you? Who is struggling with ads? You don't have it on you? Okay, so here's the thing you'll find. In many ads, what is the format of it? Anybody remember their ad? We have a great opportunity to work here at, right? And then you say your company name, then you say as a salesperson, and then you list out all of your lovely requirements. And then some people love to say, if this sounds like you, email this person. And then if they don't email you, you do what? You delete the resume because they only applied online. The sad reality is no salesperson is going to follow directions. And the type of salesperson who follows directions perfectly probably is not one that you want. So when you take this ad, what I would encourage is you start off, instead of the requirements, you say the perks. So instead of the opportunity at XYZ company as a salesperson, you talk about the company story and make it sizzle. The other amazing thing about really great salespeople is we tend to have the attention span of gnats, right? So when we tell the story, we would say, you would get the opportunity to work alongside JB, who is a prominent member of the Entrepreneurs Organization based out of XYZ. He personally started this company as, and you tell the story, then leading him to the Inc. 5000. Now, remember that list we had of benefits plus, big city versus small city? You can easily add in, As working from New Haven, you'll benefit from an incredible community of like-minded individuals that allows you to scale within your company. Applicants now do not want to know what's required of the job. They want to know that number one, they'll be paid fairly, not even well, they'll be paid fairly. Number two, that you care. And number three, and this is the best part, that working for you, regardless of what happened, will put that at a competitive advantage versus anywhere else they would pick from a leverage standpoint. So they need to know that by working for you, they will get some benefit that nobody else will provide. So if you say, we invest in our people, love to train them, and care about your own personal growth, that line right there will immediately get you more candidates. Because most companies now are leading with the requirements, and they're not even talking about that person's personal growth. I don't care if it's a company of one person. If it's one person, what am I going to do? Okay, what are the negatives of working for one person? Sounds like I'm going to be micromanaged, probably not going to be paid that well. Maybe I've got to have more skin in the game. Or if that's how I'm currently approaching my ad, I'd say, wow, I get to work alongside an industry-leading expert who's specialized in this for 20 years and have a fast-paced trajectory for growth where as the company grows, more opportunities will become available. Same thing, just a different way of looking at what the one person thing is. So you lead, think, when you want to apply, if you want to attract a candidate, what are all the objections that candidate would have for working for you? And how can we put a spin selling, how can we put a spin on those objections to not only make it appealing, but to prove to them that there's more leverage in actually working for you than if they were to go with your competitor. And then you list the perks, include the base plus the salary, but don't say, oh, it's $20 an hour plus 15% commission, because we can't understand that. But if you say our first year average reps make on average $60,000 to $80,000 plus full benefits, well, now they're interested. And you know what it should pay because you've scoped the competitor. And then you list any other perk you can, working on alongside an industry expert, fast-paced, unmicromanaged environment where you get to learn from today's best trainers, X amount of personal days, sick days, vacation days. And then at the end, you say something very simple. You're not asking them to email you your resume because they're not going to do it and you're just going to get pissed off anyways. You just simply say to them, if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, regardless of what you think your resume looks like, just send it to me. We'll know if you're a good fit and give you a call within 24 hours. That's it. You're going to get a ton more resumes. And then what happens is when they do apply, you simply say, awesome, are you available for a quick phone screen? And if it looks good, you contact them immediately as quickly as you can, because that 24 hours disclaimer. And then you simply say at some point on that phone call, by the way, I know if you're like me, because now you're appealing to them, if you're like me, you've probably applied to 100 places. Ha, ha, ha. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I did. Cool. Look at our website and just write me a couple paragraphs on why you think this would be a fit. And now you've added that heart back into it. And now you've created a fan where they're actually going to try to sell you on why they should work for you. Every single time, does not fail. Did you have a question? No. Okay. How are we doing? Any questions so far? Okay, so that's one of the tricks on the ad. Oh yeah. That's part of the toolkit. You guys are just gonna spend like the entire weekend nerding out on this. I love it. Here's a great tip. How many of you guys have marketing departments? Okay. If you have, who does the marketing in your company? Just, you have a department or just you guys do your own marketing too? Perfect. Awesome. Here's what I would say. If you are blessed to have a marketing department or you are your marketing department, your ad should never be written by somebody in HR. Because as I said earlier, everything in our lives is sales and selling. So if you have a marketing department or you're blessed to have a marketing department, or get this, you want to steal my ad and use it, I don't care. Go online and look up wholesale warranties and salespeople and just steal my ad. I don't care. Just rewrite some of the stuff, but just steal my ad. And here's why. If your marketing department is creating the ad. You are thinking of this in a sales process. So in order to attract, so what's marketing do? They attract all your customers, right? Marketing attracts the customers so you guys can sell them ideally, right? Or at least they don't negate from potential customers wanting to learn about you. Same concept in recruiting. So you are not just posting an ad for HR sakes, you are trying to attract your dream buyers, people, and then do something with that lead. Same concept. So if your ad really sucks and you don't want to steal mine and just rewrite a couple of the words here and there, have your marketing department write the ad. Worst comes to worst, you'll get more resumes than you are now. Keep thinking that's my projector. It's not. Okay, how are we doing? We've got tons of time. Okie dokie. Yeah, bio break. Great idea. You've never heard that? Oh, yeah. What else is everyone else doing? I'd love to get a. Oh, okay. How are you doing? Are you recruiting or where's your struggle?
We're kind of, I think, fall outside the category most because parent services.
It's tricky.
It's tricky. And so there's a sector of our services that I think would lend itself well to having salespeople who will require work. But what we struggle with is there's a certain level of technical knowledge the individual would have to be able to talk confidently, pitch that information, which I'm sure can be learned. But so kind of deriving the playbook as to how these people would effectively sell and how to get them up to speed to be able to do that, probably something I'd like to hear about.
Cool. Who else? Anybody else have any?
For interviews stuff?
No, I hesitate because of my passion for recruiting. I would hate for you guys get excited about how to create the onboarding and the playbook and just spend the entire time on recruiting. So I'd rather keep going with this and like show you guys all the different pieces. So that way, at least this side of the room is addressed, but I want to know what the general pulse is of the room. How are you two doing back there, April?
Good.
Okay.
It's not relevant, I think, for us.
Okay.
For many, many reasons, but.
It is a little trickier, yeah, for what you guys do.
So specific, I mean, I can tell you what, I will wish everything's done, it's just so different.
Okay, so we're.
What's that? It's childcare, so there's two, and I tracked stats for 25 years, referrals, word of mouth, all of our clients come from word of mouth.
Yeah.
So that being said, we focus on culture, and then the other thing is the website. The website looks great, I mean, I just redid it again. It's, and you know, I do Google ads, I do Facebook ads,
Yeah.
Insta posts, Facebook posts. It's really, if the product is great, they're coming. And if a
Yeah.
mother is pregnant, you don't have to convince her for a childcare. She either is or she isn't. And if she is, she's gonna put daycare near New Haven, and we're gonna pop up number one. She's gonna call us, she's
Yeah.
gonna come to our center. And if she likes us the best, she will. It's just, it's nothing more than that in childcare.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
Mhm. It does. I mean, I spend $2,000 a month on social media with my company, so they're handling it, they're professional, they know what they're doing, the SEO, we do it all. So
Yeah,
we're full, so I mean.
yeah. Well, when I saw your review, I was like, you might be the trickier one, but there is, there's a script, and I'll just kind of word vomit it in case it helps. So that way you at least don't leave with anything. When you're doing, I'm sure it's like a tour or an interview with the prospect, yeah. If there is anybody ever hesitant, the line, and this comes from, Unbreak had mentioned, I've got my master's prac in neuro-linguistic programming with an emphasis in hypnosis, right? Which, believe it or not, you can do 100% online in hospital. It's great times. I'll send you that link too, everybody. But the line that I learned when inbound leads are great and somebody has a decision of where to go, but you clearly are number one, is I can't guarantee if we're the best fit for you. Let me ask you roughly 5 to 10 questions. And from those questions, if we are the best fit, we can talk about pricing and next steps. If we're not, I can always refer you to somebody else in the area. And like, we've just found that like that lowers cognitive bias. There's one company that we've done that for that's like, because like we'd have people come in, they weren't sure because there were so many marketplace leaders that it just helped. I don't know if that's relevant for you either, but Cool. So we're going to jump through the interview points. And I'm going to speed that part up to give you guys the onboarding and the playbook, if that's a good game plan for everyone. Okay, cool. Everybody just grab your phone, take a photo of this. Every single interview with the salesperson, these are the questions I ask. That is so East Coast too.
Not your head, sir. Hey, I'm trying to get the shot.
Now he's got the self-confidence in him.
The only disclaimer I'll add is, as managers or entrepreneurs, sometimes awkward silence makes us uncomfy. The last one, let it get awkward. You'd be surprised what you hear. It's crazy.
A quick question for you.
Yeah.
So you have somebody who's in charge of client development. So they're more about maybe alignment to your staff or your employees. Would you consider that to be a sales position, or would you consider that to be an admin position?
Usually admin.
Maybe admin?
Yeah, it's hit or miss. Depends how detailed do they need to be and how are they compensated.
Right, we moved it from a sales position to an admin position. And I was wondering, just our experience is that it's not worked well. Sales.
I would say you know your business better than I ever would, so trust your gut and know what you're measuring. So if the admin now is really struggling, you can't figure out what it is, well, probably made the bad call. But if it wasn't working as sales and you can't analytically change it per se, like you can't figure out what that missing piece is, it's probably because it doesn't fit. So, and I can talk to you like online to like truly figure out like what is that missing link. But my guess is you already know. Yeah. Sales playbooks. Bunch of statistics that say they work. And what they can do to shorten the hiring process, increase closing percentage. How many of you guys actually have a full sales playbooks? Anybody? Okay, so I know you guys had said you did. No, you have a lot of it though, right? No, just kidding. Okay. Here's the deal. You'll make more money if you do. How's it work? Basically, it allows you the opportunity to test what's actually working versus what we are thinking might work. That's all it does, is it breaks down the analytics behind it. Where it gets fun is most companies, and if you hear Jack Daly talk long enough, he goes, if you aren't an assistant, or if you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant, and know your sales playbook. However, that's very stage 3, and I would almost argue stage 4. So if you're still doing the firefightings and selling your old accounts, well, a lot of times you don't know what it is that makes you great. So there's a software called Rev, R-E-V, and it is 25 cents a minute. And what I would do is I would record calls, or if you go to a sales call and you're allowed to just like turn your phone on and just listen to the audio, you can actually scrape that call. And over time, you can see what all the patterns are. You want to always model a sales playbook after your top producing salespeople. So if somebody's coming in for a tour, for example, whoever the top producing people are who have the most enrollment, those would probably be the people who know what's in a sales playbook, not necessarily the managers or the bosses. When you transcribe their calls, or when you are looking for it, there's certain sections, systems, and processes that go into the playbook that determine its efficacy or not. And here we go. You guys can take a photo of this too. I know that's my favorite too. But basically, here's what goes into your playbooks. And I will show you a really cool way to put this digitally, so it shuts down that, or so it shortens the time of that onboarding process. So what you want to do is you want to flow chart your sales cycle. What does that mean? For goodness sakes, Kaylin, what does that mean? That means every sales cycle is roughly 6 to 8 sections long. I've been hard pressed to find one that's different. However, it wouldn't surprise me if it is. So what is the 6 to 8 sections? Remember how I always joke that selling is personal. These 6 to 8 sections, and I give or take, same with any personal relationship. So if you're meeting someone new, what do you do? There we go. So we've got our first section. Then what? I'm so sorry. One more. Yeah. Introduction. I call it an agenda, but an intro is the exact same thing. So this is, what's the point of meeting that person? Here we're at EO. Hey, I'm Klyn. Thank you for coming to the workshop today. Tell me about your business. I'm just simply mentioning, hey, this is the point. I want to learn about your business today. So you mention what that agenda is. Hey, thank you for coming in. We may or may not be a great childcare provider for you, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about your family. Whatever it is, this is what you want to learn about them. Step 3 is, anybody take a guess? I kind of already gave it away because I messed that up. Tell me about your business is you are asking questions. Cool. Discovery, absolutely. And this is every single process ever, right? So you're asking questions, then what are you doing? You're listening. I love the quote, listen to absorb, not to respond. So you're listening and you're sharing what you've learned. Possible presenting a solution, if relevant, right? Recap. Next steps, which could be pricing, etc. Now, anybody see anything weird that directly contradicts, and I haven't been to Jack's seminars lately, but that directly contradicts Jack's? Yeah, that'd be next steps, but yeah, yeah. So it's rapport. Here's the thing. There was a study done. Actually, it was, oh gosh, when did it come out? Came out before COVID, which is fascinating, like 3 years ago. And if anybody hasn't read, go get it also, another book drop, The Lululemon Story by Chip Wilson. And what he had done is he discovered that the rapport process is essentially dead from a sophisticated buyer, right? Because, oh, hey, how are you doing? Tell me about your weekend. You know, what plans do you have? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I go fishing there too. I love golf. Like whatever that rapport is from the traditional sales model is no longer valid because sophisticated buyers of today are onto you and they know that most salespeople are only asking so that way they can get the sale. They don't genuinely care about you. What rapport is now is it says that you're enthusiastic, you know what you're talking about, and you want to get to the point and save them time, which is our most valuable commodity. This also came out in Straight Line Persuasion. There's a 22-hour seminar you guys can find online. It's going to cost you roughly $1,000. But Straight Line Persuasion was Jordan Belfort's original model before the Wolf of Wall Street popularized it. And so he uses slightly different vernacular, but he basically says, if you have rapport built into your process as something that you're grading your salespeople on, you're actually hurting them if it's a sophisticated buyer. And then Chip Wilson popularized that theory because he created Lululemon. So for those of you who do not know, it's a $128 pair of little black stretchy pants. Women love them. That's like pretty much all I wear when I'm not speaking, and even sometimes when I do speak. And what he had found is he looked and said, okay, who's the type of chick who spends $128 on a pair of freaking pants, much less stretchy pants, like workout pants that she's not even gonna work out in. And he found that that woman is so quick with her time that she wants to go in, look at a pair of pants on a wall, pull her size, maybe try it on, get out the store. So he optimized the entire store around this concept of create less time suck on your customers. And he had found that when the women who are educated enough to be able to afford this level of service, this $128 pair of pants, when you go into a fitting room, if you come out to check in the mirror and make sure it looks good, what you don't want to hear is like a $10 an hour sales rep telling you how great you look. And many retail stores that was inverted because, oh yeah, look at how great you are. This is beautiful. You should try this shirt with it. Sophisticated buyers of today realize that's all fluff. So I will very strongly say that if you're dealing with a higher net worth individual in your company, get rid of the rapport point and just try to get straight to the point to save them time because they're aware of what the time is. So any sales system typically has these 8 steps, and next steps means product pricing, setting up the second meeting in many situations, et cetera. So to your point, yeah, absolutely. And what they found is get your top producers in a room for roughly 8 hours to create your playbook and assemble top producers and managers. You want the managers there not to speak, but to absorb what they're hearing, because there's going to be certain patterns that they pick up on that the salespeople may not. And what you're going to do is going to say, what is the most standard greeting for anything you could do? What is the perfect intro statement to find out what the buyer's at? Meet them where they're at. What are the questions? For great questions, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. It was popularized in the 80s, and it basically breaks it down into situation, problem, implications, and needs. So if you're asking the right questions, you're going to uncover your buyer's situation, what problems they may or may not have without your product or service, what implications of not having those problems, and then what are the solutions that you can provide that they may or may not need. Listening to response, we get this. Sharing what you've learned, so this is a recap. Good thing is if you want to write down RB3, RB3 essentially stands for recap, share a benefit 3 times. So anytime in a sales discovery cycle, even as we're all doing it now, you listen, you recap or restate what they say. And then if you've actually paid attention, you're looking for 3 things, 3 buying signs, and you bring that all together at the end and make a recommendation. So it sounds like this. Based on what you told me, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, right? I would recommend insert the fit that you're looking for because of, and then you say the 3 things that they said that make you recommend this. I know, RB3. And we can get into that if you guys want more of that information later on. You present that solution with that recommendation, you recap for calibration, and then you talk about next steps. Most sales cycles are the exact same thing. So however you equate that, when you create your playbook, these are the steps you follow in it. And then that follow-up process is documented. Now, here's where many sales, there's something called a full touch. And a full touch says you have contacted them every single way you can. Hint, when we go back to recruiting, a full touch, look for the candidate that will email you, message you on LinkedIn, go to your website. The more points of contact they have, the more likely that person is to be a better salesperson, and the more likely they are to be able to reach your customer on several different mediums as well. So a full touch says, have a copy of all voicemails, all texts, all emails, any full touch that you assign your team to be able to send out, duplicate, and replicate against anybody else in the company. And then when it's implemented, use that recording as a training supplement. So when you hear a really great call, and at first, here's what's going to suck for all of you. If anybody actually wants to create their playbook, you're going to get parts of Steve's call that's awesome, and you're going to get parts of Buddy's call that's really good at the end, and Jocelyn's going to send out amazing text messages, but Stacy's got the emails. So you're going to absolutely hate it because it's up to your manager then, or in some cases you, to assemble all these different pieces of what is the best of the best and make it coherent. And by the way, that is so stage 3 and 4 task that if you're not done with the firefighting, or you're not out of the sales process, you'll never get to that anyways, which is why most people start off, if we go back 10 slides, I don't have the time. So this is where it gets very tactical. Questions so far? And don't worry, I'll show you what this all looks like. So if anybody's like, Kaylin, this does not click for me yet, I got you, boo. Okay, here's your layout. Ta-da! So for my visual friends, take a photo, have fun. But there's 4 sections in your playbook. This 5 to 8 step sales flow is this 5 to 8 steps right here. JB, how you doing? Okay, all right. Okay. All right, so and don't worry, I will log online. This has the internet down here, right? Okay, so I will get online and I will actually show you a custom sales playbook that follows this section, is 100% digitalized, and it was pieceworked by all the top producers of every major company. So anytime you onboard somebody new, meet the team, especially nowadays with everything virtual, you might not get to know who your whole team is if it's a hybrid model, what policies they need to understand, anything HR wants you to say. Then it's the sales process. Hint, the sales process is what the best practices are for the salespeople. Then it talks about the products, how the incoming leads happen, or what happens with prospecting. Anything you need to know about the competitor info. So this is that stage 4 competitor analysis that we talked about. The piecework of your 8 pieces. And then here's the thing that catches most people off guard. What are the 5 common, most main objections that your company has? So this is where we go back to the small town versus big town. Yell it out at me. What are the main objections you guys are hearing in your business?
Signing contract last week, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not even putting, that's
I would say if
that's
we're all
lost.
set, that would be one.
Overall what?
We're all set, whatever that is. In other words, the objection is, we're good, we're good, we have one of those.
That's just they're not interested. So yeah, okay, so time. If they're set, I'm not going to waste my time trying to sell to somebody who's not interested. Like there's so at any given time, anything being sold in the marketplace has a 3% ratio of people who are interested. Anything at all, 3% ratio of people who are interested. Outside of that 3% is what we can do as fishing, right? So like, we'll just see, we'll put our information out there, brand awareness, if they're ever interested, at least will be somewhat top of mind. So in the point where it's like, oh, I just signed a contract or I'm not interested, or I don't even want a brand new car. Why are you trying to sell me on an alternator? Like whatever the thing is, like I wouldn't consider that an optionable sales strategy. So if it's not relevant, it's not relevant. So time, somebody said money. Yep. I like that. I haven't heard that one for a while.
Fear of change.
Ooh. I'll put that in money. This gets good too, in case you're like, what is with this bullet list? This bullet list gets good. Give me one more. Okay, I don't like your people, your product, your company. You guys ripped me off before. Your wine tastes like skunk. I don't know, whatever it is. Like they don't like the people, they don't like the product, they don't like the leadership team, etc. Okay, I'll add that.
Who's gonna be responsible in case a hurricane hits?
Oh, that's a, yeah, that'd be a, oof. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. That's a good one to add. Technically, that might be considered in the delivery and the specs, but whatever, same thing. Okay, so remember your list of big city, small city, plus minuses? Every single one of these, you can use that same mental logic to create the way that they come over the objections using the ledge statements you've learned earlier. So if it's time, what is the most common objection in your company for time? It's usually I don't have enough of it, right? Or who's going to run this if we were to go forward with your product? And this is typically for my B2B people. So maybe my seat, I'm sure you guys don't get time when you're selling wine. Like, oh, who has the time to drink this all? Everybody. So that one might not be relevant for you. So if it's not relevant for you, just whatever. But it's usually I don't have the time. And what did we uncover earlier with the ledge statements? I understand that you don't have enough time in your day. And then you flip it back. Let's figure out how you can get more time, right? Or I understand that you don't think you have enough time. Have you considered XYZ? So any single objection you have, create a ledge statement for proactively, or hint, if you don't have to do it, here you go. If you don't know how to do it, your best salespeople do, because that's why they're closing more accounts than you, right? So there was one, where is, I don't like the people, I don't like the product. I understand that you might have had an issue with one of our sales reps before. Can you please tell me more about that issue in detail? And then let them complain for a minute. Awesome. So here's what you need to know about that situation. That person's no longer with us. That person has moved here. Here's all the things we've implemented going forward. And you can just simply come up with any way to overcome the objections, and you build that in to your section 3 in your playbook. So when your new hire starts, the worst place, according to Jack, and I agree, the worst place for a salesperson to learn how to overcome objections is not on the field with the customer. It's proactively. And we will have entire meetings, I call them pitch competitions, where we get all the salespeople on a Zoom and we record it, and they know what the situation is like a week in advance. And it'll say, hey, here's the deal. And whatever the issue is that's going on the most that people are saying, whether it's price, et cetera, hey, we're getting really beat out by this competitor. Awesome. So the situation I'm going to present to you is in 1 week, everybody's going to get on the Zoom and we're going to talk about XYZ wine distributors as the bigger competitor and how they're beating us on price by $200 per case. So what I want you guys to do is give me your best objection handling, and I'm going to record it. And then one of you guys are going to win a $500 gift card. And what you're doing is when they're all on the Zoom and they pitch, I always let the top guy go first. And then as you're listening, you're paying attention, who cannot handle this objection? And whoever in your company on your sales force can't handle that objection, that's who gets the one-on-one training later in that month until they have it perfect. And then the very next competition, when they do well, usually I try to pick something so that their egos are nice. It's something called think, right? Which we'll get into. And think basically says like, be nice. But when it then gets into it later, what tends to happen is your bottom people are learning from your top people, and it's all completely online and digitized. So that way the objection's taken care of forever. You know you've got a great sales force when the senior reps start policing the underperforming reps and bringing them out, because nobody wants to be embarrassed on the pitch competitions. And it becomes a game. Bonus points, invite your entire company to attend.
Get file of your sales force. Because now you're asking me to waste my time.
I understand that's how you feel. Totally. If I were in your shoes, I'd feel that exact same way, because we're going to do the exact same ledge statement, because technically he's giving me an objection right now. I understand that's how you feel initially. And in that amount of time, how many people do you think you could call? Okay, so it's typically only an hour long, and your portion of that is roughly 8 minutes, because I've got a sales force of 10. So in that 8 minutes, let's say hypothetically, you're going to call 3 accounts. Here's the deal. Are you a top guy in this situation or a horrible one?
I'll be a top guy, so you're doing so.
Yeah, exactly. So as a top producer, here's the thing. I know your 8 minutes is roughly going to be worth to you about $200 extra in commission or whatever that amount is. We've got a couple options at this point. Number one, I need you to help the team, because if you're not helping the team, well, eventually you're going to have to bail the team out when they need that help anyway. So this 8 minutes is proactive enough to help you help the team. Second of all, we've been working together for a while now, so I would hope you would just do me this solid and at least test this theory. And lastly, you get time and a half for overtime. Those 3 accounts, how about I just give you 3 extra hours, and then you can call triple the amount of people. And because, hey, buddy sucks this month, why don't I give you one of his leads because he can't close it? That way you don't have to mentor him and go on ride-alongs. What are your thoughts?
That's it.
So that's the ledge.
That worked.
So bribery and buy-in are all the same. But hopefully at this point, if you've got a good flowing team, your top producers, and also here's the thing. I was nervous when I first implemented this, very nervous to do a pitch competition. But the top producers are so starved for validation, because every great sales rep likes to be validated, that they kind of puff their chest up to show those guys who the best one is. And if you invite your entire company and they have to see that, I'd be more wary of the people who don't want to do it and then look at their performance, because something tells me there's a nerve there. And then there was one guy I did get pushback on, fun kid, he's doing real well. And my response is, like it or love it, until the entire team's operating at your level, I don't have a choice. So how would you propose I come out this? And they'd be like, oh yeah, 8 minutes is fine. And then immediately afterwards, here's the thing. Anybody who does well gets a prize and a company-wide shout out for winning the pitch competition. Never hear an objection again. Great question though. And then MVP calls. So anytime you hear a great call, you might have to go to Fiverr and get somebody to splice it, because there might be sections of it and you'll piece it all together, but you want to have an MVP calls. Here's how Donnie overcomes how to deal with change in the company on an objection on the sales call. And you ask your sales team, hey, when you have a really good pitch, if you don't know where to start on this, you pull a meeting and you tell your salespeople, anytime you overcome any of these objections, if you think you did a good job, send me that call or tell me what you said, and we'll give you like a prize or something like that. And it can be leaving early on Friday, extra incentives, quick like time and a half, because the ROI of you actually having this all bulleted out to teach everybody in perpetuity is going to be way greater than that. And so the team will eventually, now I think one of the most annoying things about when I work for companies is it starts off with a lot of, to your point, I call it pushback, right? And now it's like, hey, I did really good on this. Will you send it? Listen to this. Tell me what you thought. And like you get to the point where you're like, I don't want to listen to your 45 calls this week. Like, shut up. We know you're good. So it gets really interesting. And then that's why I call it a vault of templates. Those are those email text touches. And then the last part may or may not be relevant, but a demonstration of how to use every part of tech in your company. So many of you aren't on Salesforce. When you are, gonna need that. Any CRM, how to troubleshoot a headset, like all the annoying stuff that you need to remote in and hire tech people for, have that vault in it. Everybody got their photo who needs some? Cool. And then you'll see how to put the playbook together in just a couple more slides, but I wanted to show the training side of it first. So what's interesting is the training piece. So what we just talked about, the training piece of the sales flow is only section 3 and part of 4. The rest of this, anybody in your company can come up with. So you only need the managers for the last 2 sections. And then when you train a new hire salesperson to scale, you simply just need to remind them, if at very worst, you just need to go from sections 2, 3, and 4. Anybody in your company, what did I say? Start somebody on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, right? Typically Wednesdays or Thursdays. But anybody in your company, if you wanted to, they could do sections 1 and 2. And that means that Wednesday and Thursday of that week, they don't really need any hands-on from the management because they're taking the seminars. And then Friday, which is when you strategically built your non-busy day, Friday, you can work with the new person and answer any questions they have because they're trained on the basics of your company or industry on that Wednesday or Thursday. So the salespeople, I try to start on Tuesdays. Monday is section 1, Tuesday is section 2, Wednesday, Thursday, you know what I'm talking about. Thursday is section 3, Friday is section 4 and questions. And then Monday, because they've probably forgotten most of it, right? And then by Monday morning, that's when we can get into the role practicing. And I call it practice instead of role playing because everyone freaks out. They're like, oh, I don't like to role play. And if you've been to Jack Daly's, like no good football person shows up. And on his first day is like, oh, no, I got this, coach. I don't need anything. So that way everything is taken care of. And if I do have fires that come up, I've strategically built the fires in on Mondays and Tuesdays. So that way everything is on the system and I don't have to worry about it until the following week. What's interesting is when we go back to the recruiting side, only 10%, it's estimated 10% of salespeople are motivated to seek out training. You will dramatically shorten the learning curve and onboarding time if you just simply ask them what the great book was that they've last read or what kind of training they've done and enjoyed, because most people just aren't going to do it. And that gives you a real good indication for how much they actually care about growth in the big picture long term. National sales closing rate, 27%. And what the scariest part of this is most people don't know how to ask for the sale. So who said that earlier? Somebody said ask for the sale. Perfect. Most people don't. And that's, if I were to say, if there's anything you get from that, remember the first slide is that what that one guy said at that one seminar, and how you guys took it back to your forum. You'll grow your sales force just by reminding your people to ask. And whether that's a soft close or a direct close, irrelevant if they're not doing either of it. And that line I had mentioned earlier about like, regardless of if we're the right fit or not, I can always refer you to someone else if I can ask you a few questions first. That at least will open you up at the end to, did you want to hear about other people that I'd recommend, or did you want to talk about next steps with me? And now you've circled it back, you've soft closed. So now they are deciding if they want to give you the business or not. Okay. Okie dokie. So we've been talking about this a little bit. Here's the biggest pitfalls that I've seen. The company, it's usually an owner's problem, train just for the sake of training. We need 10 training hours a month from the sales manager, or we need to go to 6 sales seminars a year. Yes, I get it. It feels good to say, but the reality is, if you are training just for the sake of training, you're not actually growing. And that's where there's usually a disconnect. So whenever you're trying to do what you had asked earlier, get the buy-in, start on time, end on time. A lot of times we tend to be, myself included, super long-winded. And what happens is the salespeople tend to lose trust in the organization because, oh, this is another meeting. I don't know when it's going to end again. So if you say to that top producer, listen, your involvement in this is 8 minutes, and you can probably hear something from another rep that could help you close more. Cap it at 8 minutes. I have a timer. And if it goes off, Or if somebody talks over, like I'll put my hand up, I'll mute their line, and on Zoom, it's like muted, like you've been muted or whatever that thing is. And if they just won't shut up, I'll remove them from the Zoom room. And then get this, because I've recorded the Zoom, I make them watch that recording before they can get back on the phones. I'll cut their leads. I'll do whatever it takes because like my time is everything and consistency is key. Praise in public, feedback in private. Here's the monthly mandatories. So every single time you do training, do one learning event, and a learning event can be a pitch competition. It can be hear how Jimmy sells our people and product when somebody's not happy. Continuous call coaching, bottom 30% of any sales force needs to get call feedbacks regardless, every single month from your managers. And again, this is in that templated calendar that I'll show you. And then every single time you see something, the greatest time to congratulate a salesperson is, any guesses? Yeah, in front of everybody, yeah. But it's when they make the sale. So you can create a Slack channel, and anytime a salesperson gets a sale, have them post the sale. And then everybody can respond with emojis. At first, to be honest, I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world, but you'd be surprised how much salespeople need validation. And then anytime I hear a good call or somebody does an awesome thing or they refer somebody, just not only does that go in Slack, but I call it the MVP of the week, and I mass broadcast it to everybody in the company. I did a really dumb, cheesy thing. If any of you guys want to implement this, or I called it spirit fingers. And then we just started sending memes back and forth for spirit fingers. The dumber it is, the usually it works. I don't know why, but people like it. And literally I send it to everybody in the company, because if the sales force is the lifeblood of your organization, those are the people that need that attention the most. All right.
Sending email blasts or acknowledging somebody. So Grace and I both think we're the MVPs of whatever time period. She gets it, I don't. Automatic recognition. Right? So is that based on, so how do you deal with that? Is that clear cut, objective, measurable so that I understand why she be
100%. I'm not sending congratulatories just because I need to send a congratulatory that week. It is strategic, and get this, it's based on the playbook. So if somebody implements the playbook well, especially when you're creating the playbook for the first time, like, because how else are they going to know to do good? 100%. And here's the deal, this is what I love about salespeople. We gossip more than any other human. So if you're sitting there and you're like, Grace always gets the MVP, I didn't get it enough. I actually have a spreadsheet of how often I'm sending out MVPs for everybody. So it's a little more strategic. And then I look for the good in that person if I feel like they're having a bad month. I typically don't achieve people who aren't growth, or congratulate people who aren't growth minded, or I don't think will be in the company in 6 months. It's a great way to weed out talent, anti-recruiting, if you will. And because gossip is great, should I hear any chitter chatter down the thing about your attitude about Grace? Well, that's why we have a one-on-one. And I'll be like, listen, I know you're upset that Grace is getting a lot of MVP recognition. You haven't. Talk to me about why you don't think you have. And I'm like, because we're going to find a solution. Because if anything, I want to congratulate you more, but these are the 6 things I'm seeing, which is why I can't. So which one do you want to own for the next month? And should you be able to own that, I'd be more than happy to give you a public MVP, because it's not about the MVP. My guess is there's something deeper, which is preventing you from being able to sell the way she does. And then the problem usually eliminates itself. Stuff is fascinating. This slide, I'm just going to slip.
technically in your case, that's also a response to my experience from a competitive person.
Totally.
Next time.
Yeah.
So if I'm being hey, you win. What happened that time? Let's look at that, and it becomes a motivational opportunity. As opposed to
yeah, 100%. And you bring up a great point. There's a difference between gossip and mediocrity. Both I don't really like, but anybody can have a bad month. So, I mean, it does depend, you know, on the person. Typically, if you're an underperformer, you're going to get a little more jealous and bitter. The top producer is going to be like, yeah, great job, Grace. What did she do that I didn't? So in the way in which we listen to those questions is the way in which we'd respond. I make the analogy, it's personalized medicine. So like the doctors aren't going to give you the same medicine as they give to everyone else if your case is different. You should manage the same in theory, right? But I always try to listen. So we have one guy in one of the companies, and he is very much, I mean, the first complaint was Kaylin's difficult. Kaylin doesn't understand. Kaylin's cutting us down. And just based on that, which part of the sales process do you think he's at? Like if you had to rank the entire team, where do you think his numbers are? Yeah, he's at the bottom. And so it's a very, like those at the bottom are always the loudest. And so it's very easy to sit him down and say, hey, here's the thing. I want you to succeed. I don't want anyone on my team making less than 100K a year, else I'm not doing a great job. Here's the 10 things that, or 5 things or 3, whatever you have, that makes Grace different than you. Which one do you want to own for the next month? And I'll coach you through it. Like, here's my cell phone number. Call me. We'll talk this out. Because the last thing I want is next week to feel like, or next month, you to feel like you failed in this particular department again. And the problem usually fixes itself. Usually they start applying for jobs. In which case you offer to fix their resume, and then you have a friend in a competitive or a competitor's thing, and you send them to your competitor with great words of recommendation. So there's that. Yeah, which one do you need?
For us, that is the training part. So when customers come in, many times, you know, the general thing is gonna help you.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm fine, like, don't bother me kind of thing. Do you have any recommendations of how to, you know, as a customer, when you come in, we know what we want to hear, which is, yeah, I want your help, but maybe not now, or do you
Yeah.
have any techniques for?
I love that. How can I help you is the same as building rapport, because we've heard it 1,000 times and they don't actually want to help you. Usually a manager said you must say that the second you walk in the door. So if I'm a guy, let's use an example of a guy, and I need to buy a shirt. Quick, how many of you guys love to go shopping for shirts? Like you're just gonna spend all day at the mall, right? No. You could walk into a place, know you need a shirt, know what size of the shirt you need. And if the sales rep goes, can I help you? No, even though you don't technically know which part of the, like, you know what you're going to buy. And you're now annoyed, right? How can I help you? The reason that might not be a great question is because it opens up the possibility, number one, for the person to feel rejected, the customer to immediately put their guard up. And then worst comes to worst, if they do need the help, what if the employee is not trained enough? Now you're just stuck with an idiot, right? So what I've found is instead of how can I help you? Hey, welcome. Out of curiosity, do you know much about our wines, or is there a certain section I can point you to? Because now I'm already leading that sale. And I don't know per se with your exact situation, but you know, is this your first time in the store? That's another great one. Is this your first time in the store? Oh yes, cool. Well, if you have a certain section, I can walk you to it, tell you a little bit about our store, why we do what we do and why we care so much. Or if you want, I'll just point you to where you need to go. And just that way you give them the opportunity for about, no, I know what I need. Awesome. If you change your mind, I'm here to help. And then you just make it you give them the option to make it easier. Because when people walk into a retail store, they're basically not looking for help as much as they're looking like, just point me in the direction of where to go. Where's my shirt? Do you need help pointing the direction? Do you know much about wines? The other thing that's interesting is forgetting his name. It starts with a T. Who's bartender exchange guy? Yeah. I know the bartender guy's name, Rob, John something, John Tapper. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. He has a really great sales strategy that like, oh, I love it. So the first time you go into the store and they check out, right? So it's one thing to say hi to a new customer. It's another thing to turn them into a customer for life. Both are sales systems. And was this your first time in our store? Oh yeah, it was. Cool. here's a card. The second time you come back, we'll give you a free tasting of the red wine of the month or whatever that is. And say, just bring this card in. We've always got it below the register as a second time gift. So when they come back, now they've got that register. Awesome. Well, if you really like this, here's the third time you come in, because now they're back for the second time. Here's the third time. This one's all about whites, or this one's all about rosés. And so you give them a different little business card each time they visit to come back and try a different tasting. And then like when you get them on your email drips or your newsletters, you can just simply say, hey, if there's something special that you're looking for, go ahead and just message us and we can let you know when it comes in next. And so it's that more proactive thing to keep them in that buy. So hopefully that helps. Some of the things I've seen. But look up John Tapper's restaurant card sales system. It's brilliant. And he does it with like restaurants like, oh, you'd love this chicken. Well, here, since you're back here, the next time is red meat. And he just switches the menu out so they keep coming back. It's fascinating. Hope that answered it. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. This is probably the longest part of that and also arguably the one I've gotten the worst feedback on. So we're going to skip this slide today. It gets really deep into NLP and psychokinetics of training methodologies, so pass. Big thing is whether it's with all-stars or non-producers, just make sure you're being nice. You know, they say the compliment sandwich. The problem is people are so aware of compliment sandwiches now that sometimes it backfires because like, yeah, but tell me what I actually need to know. And the thing I love about the East Coast is we call a spade a spade. So just call a spade in a nice way. And then always offer to give them something that will level the playing field against somebody who's doing better than they will. I try to not compare as much to others minus public praise, because public praise is for the person being praised, not necessarily for the rest of the team, as much as compared to their selves before. So I manage all of the different KPIs and their processes, and then I show their growth trajectory month over month in their one-on-one meetings. So that way they know, hey, these are the things I'm doing really well. These are things I'm not. You should never, Reed Hastings said it in No Rules. Nobody should ever be genuinely surprised about their performance on the team. And PS, that's rarely actually negative. So somebody will have a really bad month. I'm not saying that they won't, but they know that for the last 3 months before that, it's been awesome. And you just call it just straight there when you see it. The worst thing to do is wait for a quarterly review and then give the feedback that they've needed this entire time. But usually those problems work themselves out after a couple of months. Anybody wants to take a photo of this? If not, I'm just going to skip it. But basically the Harvard Business Review, Yale, did a chart of the 50% of high performing sales organizations and the processes that they have. Closely monitored, strictly enforced, or automated is typically stage 3, which relates to the training and development that they need. So know what you're monitoring and monitor it in accordance with the sales playbook. We're making good time now. Cool. Do you got that photo or do you need? Okay. I was like, I think his camera's malfunctioning. Training schedules. This will be emailed to you. Just delete my stuff out and put yours in. But usually on day 1, that Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, the first hour is a welcome. And remember, everything is sales. So the welcome isn't, hi, welcome to this company. This is what we do. It's, hey, we're so glad you could join us. Let me tell you the story of how we came to be what we do and what we do for our customers. And you're telling a story that sells them on the first day because hint, sometimes candidates don't want to show up for the second day. So this was actually implemented during the pandemic. We had a great conversation with Jeffrey and Grace about what I've seen in hiring and actually where the referral bonuses came, the MLM came. And we found that a lot of people were trying to potentially scam unemployment benefits by applying, but not actually showing up for the job. And we realized that even if they are showing up for the job, their stuff is mediocre. We have to fire them within the first 4 days. And we realized it's because they don't know how great we are versus anybody else. And remember, the number one thing that people want when they are looking for talent is that working for you will dramatically increase the quality of their life over working for your competitor. So I get the most charismatic person in the room on day one, their very first hour in the shift, to paint a story of why this is an incredible opportunity, the history of the company. And really that is the most charismatic person's ability to sell them on why they should continue their shift and stay with us. Because at that point, we're in control on if we want to fire them or not them. So that was actually implemented.
Instead of like the owner or the manager doing it, yeah.
You can have both, because I do think there is something to be said about having an owner or like a manager there, but they're going to be working with their manager constantly. I want the most charismatic, the best story you can find. So if you've got somebody who started out as a stock girl and now she's front desk, front register manager, and you started her from nothing and now she's living her dream life, I want that girl. And then every section is day by day. So that way, when you get your management calendar, everything is so populated that you have time built in to put out the fires as they come up while strategically growing the team. So, yeah.
On your idea of cities. So what I observe is salespeople, they're usually students or, you know, people who are not really interested in getting a career pathways. And so either they're not engaged, you know, they're engaged, they do what they have to do, but how do you maybe do that alignment of this is the great why I live here, this is why it's great to be in a small mom and pop wine store versus some other place.
Who else is wondering how they can sell their
Or they
company?
feel like, well, you know, I'm probably work more towards somewhere else, but here I'm working at this place, you know what I mean? How do you build them up?
Who else has that question? Okay. How long have you been in business?
It's more for just about 8.5 years.
How long have you personally been in wine?
Same time.
Let's say almost 10. And if you want almost 9, that's fine too. But there's a rule, somebody brought it up on break and it was brilliant. What do I do if I don't quite feel right about this situation? So we call it ecological in neurolinguistic programming. The ecological says, I operate out of the basis, if it's good for me and it's good for Sam and it's good for EO, then I'm all in. But if at any point it's not good for me, the other person, or the organization as a whole, I'm out. And that becomes the code of ethics to run off of. So when I say almost 10 years, if it's not good for you, the customer, if your Better Business Bureau says different, if you think 10 years is too much, like, whoa, that's a lie, it's not ecological, don't do that then. Where's it located? Okay. Nice area, sketchy area, homeless people around?
Middle class area.
Cool. I just put safe, middle class, no crime. How much do they make? Is it good, average, below average for that line of work?
The employees.
Yeah.
Better than market.
Okay. Are you guys personally managing them?
Yes and no.
Sure. What charities are you involved
That's
in?
what months you're talking about. That's the reality.
Yeah, it always depends what months. We don't know that our managers are going to be there next month anyways, so like, I'll take it. What charities are you involved in or other groups?
Multiple, very active.
Just give me one for the,
Call it Rotary.
okay. Got any other ones?
Yeah. Yeah, Ronald McDonald House.
Cool. Personal question, but here we go. Husband, wife? And do they have flexibility with their schedules?
Maybe the employees.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, take a photo of this, please. Every single one of you are more than welcome to take a photo of this and put this in, because at first it looks like I'm generating a list. but I'm not. This becomes the front paragraph of your ad. So your ad would say, and if you want, hit record, because I'm just going to go off cuff, so I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth right now. And if it's horrible, then you guys can laugh. Worst speaker ever rating. Yeah, whew, no pressure. Dang, I did not think I'd be sweating. High school kids mostly?
No.
Okay.
21 to 27.
Great. We offer a great opportunity here in XYZ town, owned and operated by a family who is not only dedicated to charities such as the Rotary and the McDonald household, but they are passionate members of an entrepreneurs organization dedicated to improving the community as a whole. You will not only have a safe and flexible scheduled working environment in a, we can get rid of middle class. You will have a safe working environment with a flexible schedule and highly competitive pay. Most people, their first years in this retail wind up making XYZ amount, excellent training. And because it is a family environment, you have the opportunity to grow from within. We are always looking for the next member of our family. Perks is next. So you specifically list out all the perks. If this sounds like you or somebody in your family would love to join, I welcome not only a phone call or an email, or you can reply directly to this ad. We'll ask you a few questions. And if we think it's a fit, we look forward to seeing you in an interview within the next week. That's it. Okay. And so bulleting it out like that, that becomes that first framework of the ad before you go into the perks and then what their call to action is, which is essentially the same format of any ad you ever post. What it's about, what the perks are, how the customer benefits, and then what the next steps are. Okay. This is Jack Daly's part. What doesn't get measured doesn't get done. If you don't isolate the high performance activities, you can't delegate. That's my spin on if you don't hire an assistant, you are the assistant. If you don't isolate, you delegate. I was a cheerleader. That's where that comes from. And then, yeah. And this also applies to managers. If you, as the manager, spends all your time firefighting or selling, you kind of became a customer service rep at that point. I don't know what the typical salaries are, but for a good sales manager, guesstimating anywhere from 80 to 160K a year, all said and done. And if you're having them talk to an upset customer, well, what are your customer service reps actually doing? Because that's 15 an hour. So good job. So you want to increase your profits. That's the first thing, is get them to the ability where they can build a sales playbook and customize everything and figure out your recruiting versus talking to an upset customer. It just makes sense. Yeah.
So in the EO community, we're hearing more and more from people like Brad Stevens, that's a name everybody recognizes. The assistant level stuff is increasingly possible to be outsourced.
Totally.
Can you speak to that? Because does this change the rules for how you set up a training program, or is it even more critical to have a documented program?
I mean, I'm always going to favor documentation, but here's what's fascinating about what you just said. Yes, assistant jobs are super, I don't want to say easy to outsource, because if you've ever had an assistant not work well, you know how difficult they are to replace. I would look at how intellectual does the assistant need to be. Here's what I've found. Most technology, sadly, is so automated that we are not rethinking what an assistant does. Yeah, so hear me out. An assistant might create the reports. Well, most CRMs can do that. If I have a really good call scoring, and I can send you guys a call scoring document based off the playbook. If they're reviewing calls to tell the manager if there's a problem, well, that's done on rev.com now for 25 cents a minute. If they are making coffee, Keurig does that, great. But like all the basic jobs that they have, you'll find many of them don't require the help that they did at one point. And I can't speak as much to assistance as I can on sales performance, but I would rather have oh gosh, you guys are gonna hate me. Okay, so this one goes on ecological, and I don't even want to share this out loud, but here goes. Oh.
Just say it.
If you're desperate, you can hire. Okay, list out all the responsibilities of a sales manager. So basically all this stuff I just taught you, and this is basically my business model too. All this stuff I just taught you. Call that an assistant's job and have somebody monitor that job. And that assistant then is 20 bucks an hour. And they can build this entire infrastructure, but most assistants aren't properly leveraged enough to be able to do any of that. But you can teach an assistant how to listen to a calls. You can teach an assistant to splice really good objection handling. You can teach an assistant everything we've talked about and pay them 20 bucks an hour and say, it's a great opportunity to work alongside of the VP of sales. And then you save all that overhead. It's about 30 to 70 grand a year you'll save. And that's the executive assistant to the VP of sales. And everything can be done by an assistant for pennies on the dollar. But most times what we need assistants for have been automated, and that's what's unfortunate. I don't know if I spoke to that enough. Yeah.
And one of the things that you shared with me is really have successful assistants. You really need to define, document all of your processes that you want them to undertake. Because you can't just dump somebody. It's like having another employee. It's simply what it is. It's just their remote manager. You still have to have all the processes. You still need to know how to do the job well. To do that. So he's saying you really got to vet a teaching process for them to be successful.
There's a lot of tech.
Yeah.
A list of 75 apps that he routinely employs.
I mean, he does a lot of video recording of his training stuff. Because that's a key way to get it out real quick. But you still have to have that training done.
Yeah.
To allow them to be successful.
And I didn't mean to hijack.
No, because it's relevant. That's what's great about it, is it's the same thing, right? So the playbook, the first 2 days, if done right, the first 2 days is what the assistant needs to do to be dangerous. The third and fourth day is what the sales manager gets to critique on, especially if you're in a business that's fighting fires. So you're exactly right. And what I'll show you, I think it's 1 or 2 slides out, is what it looks like when it's put all together. And if you hire an assistant to do it, and you've got the systems and the processes to teach the assistant, it's duplicatable every single time. So a lot of the companies, so there's the digital marketing one that I talked about, Miami based. And the guy was like, I can't afford a sales manager. What do I do? And I was like, get an assistant, put him through my workshop. And he built his entire company, scaled it during the pandemic in an agency for, I think it was 17 bucks an hour. Yeah. And then I just came in as the VP of sales. Because every assistant, if you do the model I just showed you guys, every assistant wants the opportunity to join a growing firm where they can learn stuff about sales systems and processes, if in the event that they ever want to become a sales operations manager. Not a sales manager, sales operations manager. Yeah, that's fun. Did that answer the question? Okay. Take a photo if you want. You might have to get up and zoom in, but this is that calendar that I taught you guys. So everything that has happened today, this is what that monthly assistance calendar will soon look like. That built in all 4 stages of the sales systems and processes. Typically Monday I say is a busy leads day, but that could also mean prospecting. A lot of prospecting is done on a Monday. And then you can see how it all fits together in a month. What I mean by missing leads or follow-up report is when you go back through all the data and you see if there's any customers that haven't had a full touch. Remember, full touch is a call, text, or email. I always send those out on a Wednesday because usually by Wednesday, everybody's complaining on a sales team. So the warmer the lead or somebody they've already spoken with, there's less cognitive, less negative charge. And so it becomes a fun sales call day. I also try to send out the MVP of the week clubs and newsletters on Wednesdays. So it just kind of perks the office up a little bit. And then Thursdays become learning days, one-on-ones and interview days. Because again, what did I say about the offer letter? If it's 24 hours, they agree Friday, they get a 3-day weekend, they're starting with you on Tuesdays. Training's 4 days, the system repeats itself. All right, we got photos done. This is to your point, JB, reps are spending 32% of their time selling currently. So another really big driver is look at what they're actually spending their time on and outsource it. We made it a employee perk in one company this year. If you got a certain 0.2 goal or percentage over quota, I hired an assistant for the company because essentially I want to keep the top producers out of the weeds. And by it being an employee perk, it actually raised the average of the entire team up. So that way everybody wanted their own assistant. And what's interesting is you can hire an assistant, if it's, you know, and I need to talk to Brad Stevens, I don't know him that well. But essentially one assistant, you could call it a sales coordinator, can do a lot of the back end stuff for roughly 2 to 4 reps at a time. So it raises the average because if everybody's above quota at that point, number one, you can raise the expectations on quota. But number two, it gets them back on the phones with more of it. And they're 8 minutes stuck doing pitch competitions. Now they can justify because they don't have to deal with Betsy, the customer who's upset about something. They also don't have to fill out their own expense reports. We found that's really helpful. When we talk about how to document systems and processing, systems and processes, here's the things that I think should go into it. Leading versus lagging indicators. Side note, please don't care more about your CRM than you do actually the people working in your company. Far too often sales managers just sit there and hit refresh and they forget the bigger picture of what's going on. So yes, do the salespeople have to document stuff? Yes, but if the top producers have an assistant, they're not going to complain because that way that gets them on the phone more. And you just explain, hey, I'm looking for a pattern to figure out what that missing link is. And they usually come right around. The conversation quality, the worst thing you can do is hire the assistant to audit the calls and then say, oh, but it just sounded good. Sounded good doesn't tell me they did X right and they need to improve Y and Z. And PS, you know if X, Y, and Z are right because it matches the sales playbook. So if it's not in the sales playbook, it's not tied to the comp, and then you don't have to actually grow it. Closing percentage, when you have your scores and all of that in alignment with the quality of the conversations based on the playbook, there's always an X factor. I can't figure it out yet. And you guys, if you've hung out with me long enough and paid attention, you know for a fact now that I love to mind map and figure out what that missing piece of that puzzle is. When it's all equal, the X factor is who's got that talent. So I always ask people in interviews to show proof of performance at their last position, or if they're making like 120 and they want to make 120 with us, show me your pay stub and check with your company or your state, because I don't know what's legal out here. When have you ever made 120 grand before? Can you please submit proof of payment? So that way I know they have what it takes. But there's something about that X factor that actually determines the talent level. If you've been to my website, you know I firmly believe champions are built, not born. So that X factor is a piece that I'm still trying to figure out. So temperament, 87%. I don't deal with mediocrity. And if you are mediocre, you know it because of that temperament side of it. And then monthly one-on-ones, again, everything just goes straight back to those systems, processes, and that playbook. If it doesn't fit the pattern, you're going to know about it in your monthly one-on-one. But the last thing I'm ever going to do is say, hey, your call sounded really good, I'm proud of you. When analytically, I can see and grade where it comes by. If they get a low enough grade, they're stuck in more coaching, or they have to go back through the training until they can improve that grade. Leads are cut and their inability to reach out to prospects is diminished also. So on the monthly one-on-ones, they know where their average score is per the call, per the playbook. And if it's not high enough, they're back in training. So I cut everything for the 4 days it takes for them to get back through training. At first, yeah, total resistance. I was not the favorite, but now it's like, that's just part of the game because we forget most of stuff that we learn anyways, right? So it just really helps reinforce what the standard and the company culture becomes.
Are you talking about, you keep saying calls, but are you talking about more like a sales desk, dialing out, are you talking about?
Conversations with customers.
You know, spending 90% of their time out on the.
So it could be either or. In calls, I do mean actual conversations with customers. For territory reps or account reps, like what you're referring to, the B2B side of it. You know, usually managers, I recommend they do a ride along, and because they know what the playbook is, so they'll do rapid fire practices. You know, hey, what do you do if the customer says the price is too high? What do you do if customer says, call me in 6 months? Like, what is a level 5 follow-up, vice versa? And I'll typically recommend that an assistant or the sales manager will do a ride along. And if they know their own system and processes really well, they don't have to have a sheet and like check a box while they're in on a one-on-one, but they can say, hey, you missed this part. Hey, you missed this part. And then that scoring is done. So either way. But remember, if this is a lot, which if I've done my job today, it is probably a lot. I'm only monitoring the bottom performers like once the playbook is built, right? Because the playbook was built off the top performers. I'm only figuring out what's going wrong with the bottom performers, and then I'll listen to get feedback from the top performers on how we can elevate for everybody. So I'm only doing ride-alongs with those who need it or that I'm about to cut anyways. Is that helpful? Okay. Okay.
Reminds me why I don't want to be a salesman.
All right. So I have been talking nonstop. Got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to show you a video because this was really difficult to articulate. And some of this I get is kind of cerebral. So I'm going to show you guys a video of what it actually looks like when it's combined, and then I can take questions. And mind you, all of these documents are going to get emailed to you also. So if there is a point in this, you're like, wait, what was that? I didn't see it. I know we've only got so many slides and so many hours together, so bear with me. And I don't know if this has sound. So worst comes to worst. Oh, yay. So worst comes to worst, you guys will get a copy of this video too, in case you take it back to your team and you want them to understand what's going on today.